Hello.
Hola, señor.
Oh, there.
All right, let's try this. Let's try that.
I see you.
It
Your
worked.
big smiling face.
Hey. All right, let's get this sorted. Which light's better? No light. Oh,
Oh yeah.
I've arrived.
Okay, I
So
think
how you
it's
doing?
working. Huh?
How you doing?
Good, man. You?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Like
Well,
we're just talking, right?
okay is better than bad.
I tell you, man, this is a good day. I I don't have to take opioids.
Is it that painful?
It was it was that Friday and Saturday.
Oof.
Yeah. It's like so they did laparoscopic. Have you ever had laparoscopic surgery?
Yeah, for a hiatal hernia.
Okay, so you know how it goes, right?
Yeah.
When they get in there, and did they do that so mine's way down.
Oh God. Do you want
But
me to? I'll cut this out. We don't have to put this in if you don't want.
oh, you can put it in, I don't
All
care.
right.
But did you remember the gas feeling?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like when I wasn't expecting that.
Oh, they didn't warn you?
No, it was in recovery. No, it was back on the day surgery unit, and they were like, "Oh, by the way, you're gonna feel like you're having a heart attack. Don't worry about that."
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember saying, "Oh, this sounds like a feature," and yeah. So did you had the same thing then? That feeling of like,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
ow,
for like I mean it gets a little bit better each day, but for a few days. Like it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That seems to have largely passed now,
Yeah.
but
When did you have your surgery?
exactly a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah, like a week ago right now.
Huh.
Yeah, so
Fuck. That's
I'm
crazy.
good, but like sometimes I just start sweating. Like Jesus, why is this taking so much work?
Honestly, that might be part of the medications you're on too.
Yeah, that's why I kind of got rid of them. I was like, enough is enough. I haven't finished them all
Yeah.
because I don't like them. They
Yeah.
make you feel
Yeah. It
I don't
takes
know.
you away, right? Like it
Yeah.
puts
Well,
you in a
what did they put
fog.
you on for yours?
Oh
Do you remember?
God. I was on just about everything.
Like a like a
They had me
Percocet
on huh?
like a Percocet or a
Oh, you mean for the hiatal hernia surgery?
mm-hmm,
Oh, I don't
mm-hmm.
remember. I can't remember what they had me on. Probably, I don't know. I can't remember. Some type of opioid, I imagine, but I don't remember because I was,
Something that takes you away.
yeah, yeah. I had
Yeah.
7 incisions, I think, because it's like up in the esophagus area. I don't know if that's where your esophagus is, but that's why I gave 5 fingers.
Was this the shortening?
So the way that they explained it to me is they basically take part of your stomach lining and wrap it around your esophagus. Yeah. It worked. So there's that. You can look it up on YouTube. I don't
I'm
recommend it if
good.
you're ever going
I'm
to do
good.
it.
I made the mistake. Like I don't know, I've always said that like the best thing to do when I'm feeling angst about something is for me to learn about it, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, don't make me laugh. Oh, uh,
This is a terrible idea.
I was like, oh, let's go look this hernia repair up. Don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't like that.
Yeah. It's a
And
terrible idea.
so I'm like laying there in the day surgery when I get there, and then even in the OR, I'm like laying there. I'm envisioning what I watched on YouTube. And it just like,
and there's
makes
no
me
anxiety
panic.
there. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is silly. I'm like, why did I do that? Don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
knowledge is power, but ignorance is also bliss.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
I'll
made
look
a
yours up.
mistake on night shift. Um, I was in the military, and my master corporal had he was going in for vasectomy, I think is what it's called.
Yes, yeah.
Um, so he had the bright idea, because it was a slow night shift, that he was going to look it up on YouTube and watch what a vasectomy looks like. So tidbit number one is I'm never getting one done, ever.
Well, I had one.
Ever. Huh?
Easy.
And then
I had one.
you had one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about it in a bit. Yeah, keep going.
Did you look it up on YouTube?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were smart.
No.
And then he was like, "Oh, like you're going in for surgery too." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What's yours called?" And I was like, "This is a great idea," even though I had just watched the vasectomy. So we stepped in, and I was like, this was a bad idea. This was terrible. But yeah, it is what it is. I mean, you're asleep when it happens. So
let me tell you about a vasectomy here.
Okay, but before you do, because I have a feeling this is going to be a really good story. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in my basement.
A different area of the basement? Or is that the other end of is that the other side of the bar?
Oh, so the bar is right here. Yeah, so I'm just facing the other way.
Okay. Oh man, what was I going to say? Oh,
before I told you about my snip.
The doctor told him not to have sex or whatever for so many days afterwards or something.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, so he didn't listen to that. He came in at like looking like he had ridden a bull for 3 days, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Dude."
I hope that's a metaphor.
So then we went into the change room to get changed into our uniforms. His dick was as black as my t-shirt. Like it was raw, man. Yeah. There's that. So listen to your doctor if you ever get one.
What's that?
You've already had one, but if anybody out there, because I guess we're just starting this podcast.
We're just getting right to it.
But yeah, if you ever get one, make sure you listen to your doctor's notes on post-surgery.
What would be the desire to even?
Well, I mean, it's sex, right?
No, there's limits.
I don't know. I can't speak to it because I've never had one, right? Like, I don't know how painful it is. I don't know.
So I had, I don't remember when I had mine done. What is it, like November? I want to say it was like November of 19. It was cold. It was a cold, cold day in November. Okay, so
you go both outside and in your heart.
Oh my God! So you go to this place. It's this doctor. I can't remember his name is. Anyway, we call him the team doctor. Yeah, we call him the team doctor because he's done everybody at work for the most part. We joke about his soft hands. Anyway, doesn't matter. So I go to this clinic, which is an old house that's been retrofitted, right? Mm-hmm. So you go in and there's a counter, and a little waiting area, which used to be a living room, obviously. And then they call you to go down to this office, which is fine. So they send you down to this office, and you go in, and he comes in, and you lay back, and it's very, very, feels very primitive. Let's just say it doesn't feel very intimate. Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know, you don't want it to be, but like,
there's got to be a certain level of comfort, though.
Right.
You would think. Anyway,
yeah. So when he does his thing, I'm like, it's really cold out. Any chance you've got some heating pads around or something? And your normal stress response has you all, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah,
cinch straight up. So so that's cool. So a few minutes go by, and a nurse or a nursing attendant comes in, And he hands me this. Yes, he hands me this, like, this little heating pad thing that's maybe the size of a roll of electrical tape.
Okay. Like,
and he's like,
for your bag?
Yeah, he's like, you can use this. That'll help. And I'm like, thanks. Not that I need bigger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like,
I would like to wrap it, you know, or
you're
like
kind of
make me
feeling
feel a little bit better.
Well, you're
Is
feeling
this a
extremely
small?
vulnerable.
Like, are there different sizes?
Yeah. Like,
Are
what are you
trying to tell me
saying?
something?
Like, why couldn't I get the one that's the size of a roll of duct tape? Why do you give me the electrical tape size thing? Like, it's like one of those emergency first aid packs that you would keep, you know, it's like the size of a hockey puck. So I'm like, cool. So I like shove that down there, hanging out, waiting. But your stress response overwhelmingly trumps any temperature change. Your body's like,
The groundhog is staying in. right. We're not going out to see if the shadow's there. Yeah.
Because it was about -30 out that day. It was like low -20s, almost -30. And it was first thing in the morning. It was just brittle cold, right? So then they take you into the downstairs. You got to go downstairs, right? Important plot point, right? You go downstairs, you go into this room, and you're like, cool, this is a neat little room. He's got sports memorabilia and things like that all over the place. I'm like, yeah, this guy's got it figured out.
Yeah.
So he comes in and he starts doing his thing, and they lay you down. Your pants are like at your knees, and then this male nursing attendant guy came in and just took my heating pad away. Just took it. Like, you don't need this anymore. I'm like, no, I definitely do. Like, yeah, you don't need this. And then he takes an elastic with a little like Granite Toy Staples alligator clip, and he wraps the elastic around your shaft. Yeah, and then takes the alligator clip on the other end and hooks it up to your shirt.
Did he bring out a battery?
So you're like,
to get it out of the way.
Yeah, right. But I'm still feeling very vulnerable because obviously,
is he talking to you when he's doing this? Is he explaining?
He's being anything? like this is normal for him.
Yeah.
So he's decidedly more comfortable than I am.
Yeah.
So that happens. So you're laying there like a hot dog.
Did you get a chub?
What's that?
Did you get a chub?
Dude, there's no like Costanza. I think it moved. There's nothing of the sorts. It's very clinical. So I'm laying there like a hot dog. I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen. So the doctor comes in, and a lady comes in who ends up, I guess, being his wife. I find out later, because they're kind of like, they have this dynamic of chirping at each other, and so and then they do this. They call it scalpel-less, I believe they call it. So they burn
it off or something.
It's like a little zap that you get. I don't know. So they zap, and you feel a pinch, but it doesn't feel any worse than like somebody snapping an elastic band on you.
Yeah, you make that sound like it's comfortable. I don't want anybody snapping an elastic band on my balls.
Valid point. So that's the anesthetic. And then he kind of starts poking to make sure you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I don't know, feels all right. Like I feel a pressure, but he's like, okay, we'll start. And then whatever they do, again, it's scalpel-less. So it's like a little tiny little cut. I don't know how they make it. And all of a sudden they're digging around. Well, whatever he tugged on starts at your toe and ends at your forehead.
What?
Because I folded like a fucking jackknife.
It must be like nerve pain, is it?
All right. It hurts so bad.
Did you make a sound, or was it so bad that you just?
Well, so I come up off the table, like I discover levitation, right? So I'm like up off the table, and he's like, "Ooh," I said, "Yeah, ooh," and he said, "You felt that?" And I said, Mm. And so he zapped me again with the local. And then after that, it's just pressure. And like 10, 15 minutes are up. There's like the occasional little thing of smoke that comes up, and you're like,
yeah,
alarmed by that. Idle chit chat, because I had paid for some next level service. Like you get extra pain meds, you get like a goodie bag.
Okay.
So he's like, what would you like to drink? What would you know? What kind of chips would you like in this bag? And I'm like, can we just focus? Right.
The alligator clip is still on.
Yeah. So then you get out, right? And then so you're done. Recall you've walked downstairs.
Right. Oh, so you gotta go back.
Right. So you get out the room and you're like,
there's no elevator?
No, it's an old house. Like it would be.
He does it in his house?
It's an old house that's been converted for these surgeries.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a little clinic.
Huh.
And so you're at the bottom of these stairs, and I don't know, it's like a standard flight of stairs.
Yeah, but it looks like it's.
To me, it was like climbing Machu Picchu, right? And it was far away to get to the top. And then you have to walk down the hall.
Yeah.
Past the front desk, right? And they know what's up. You've just been neutered, right? And so that's where they give you your cone.
Oh my god!
No licking.
Yeah.
Right? But you got to sit there for like 15 minutes before you're allowed to leave to make sure you don't zonk out. And I was like, I'm good. I'd like to go. And the whole drive home, it was like the kids were screaming in the back. I'm like, wow.
Kids with you.
So it keeps getting better. It's this experience where you're like, man, I can't believe I just had this done. Like, I can't believe I just did this. And yeah, so it only gets worse and worse throughout that day, it seems. And then the swelling kind of starts to come up. You don't want to move much at all. It feels like you've got like a monkey hanging from your junk.
Oh man, we're not selling this to anybody. It
was a good 4 or 5 days that there was just no feeling, no doing anything. You just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And you're like, Tylenol, Advil, Tylenol. Yeah, fucking more Advil, right? Like, yeah.
So if you want to watch a good one,
absolutely, I'd like to put a plug in here.
Yes.
No desire for anything. So the fact that your
like for a sexual contact,
don't look at it.
Like, don't come near me.
Don't look.
Don't even touch my leg.
And it's kind of embarrassing too, because when you're like, oh, you want to see what happened? You want to see what they did to me? And you look, you're like, I don't see anything.
Because it's so small
it's so small. There's nothing, so you're like, look at this. Look, like you feel like you just got eviscerated.
Yeah.
And like some
but after the 5 days, are you back to normal?
Yeah, then after like 5-6 days, it was like, I'll just carry on. And I didn't want to do a lot.
Yeah.
Like I was very tentative about things, but
do your ejaculations look the same? Like there's no big change? I don't know how it works.
You don't, there's nothing different.
You still like squirt out sperm? It's just blanks or what?
There's nothing to it. Nothing changes. Like if you were, let's say you just cut that timeline out. Like let's say you could do this and you'd be like, okay, I don't want any recollection of that week. I don't know nothing of the event, nothing of going. So if you had no concept that it occurred, you would have no indication that there's anything.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's no like pain long term.
It's pretty crazy that they can do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's a good, it's a good birth control alternative.
Yeah.
I think it's a reasonable enough thing for guys to do, especially dads. Like if you're not going to have kids anymore. You don't want to have any more kids. If you're done, like if you're not done, I would not.
Even if you're not sure if you're done, I think, because I don't know how reversible it is, if at all.
It can be, but I think it's a lot more invasive.
Invasive and not probably 100%. You know what I mean? Like there's no guarantees.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of complication is probably fairly high.
Yeah.
Or at least just failure, right?
Yeah.
Because they take parts. I think they, if you have your, I think was it called your vas deferens? Is that what it is? Is that what
I don't know.
The line. That? Yeah. So you take your fuel line here and they sever it, right? So they sever it, but then they take part out. So that, and then they basically tie this one up and they cauterize the end so they can never, hopefully not get back together. But there have been apparently instances where they do meet back up and they really re-heal together. So it's
there's no guarantees.
To make that happen, to make that connection happen again later, just seems crazy.
If you want to watch another good one on YouTube,
probably not, but yeah.
Do you know what a frenulum is? You're going to watch this after
frenulum. I do know. I know the word frenulum.
So
this is my uvula, right?
I could be mispronouncing it, but like, so when you're tongue tied,
a frenum.
Frenum, is it frenum?
I don't know. Yeah, we're like.
Yes, that little piece of skin that goes from your tongue to your bottom of your mouth. So a lot of people are what they call tongue tied. So some frenums or frenulums are bigger than others.
They snip them with babies too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So if you sometimes. Like you can technically have one on your penis, and it goes from like the shaft to the head type thing.
Yeah.
And again, some people are bigger than others.
Down to your seam.
Yes.
Where you're stitched up when they're done making you. Yeah.
So some people are tongue tied, some people are dick tied, right? And there's a surgery that you can get to snip that. You should watch that on YouTube. It's like frenum or frenulum cutting, whatever. It's so bad. They take like a hot knife and like sear it, like cut into it. It's nasty.
That must cauterize then. If it's hot, it would almost cauterize as you go.
Yeah. And this is years ago that I watched this, but I remember it being brutal. So anyway, moving on. Doesn't it make you uncomfortable? Like mine's like the vacuum cords where you hit the button and the vacuum cord sucks up into the vacuum. What made you think this was a good idea, having a podcast with me after you had surgery?
Yes, I do know these cords.
It's like a belly button. I'm
give them a quick tug and they just.
Now I'm an innie.
Yeah, and the cord that when you were a kid, be around the corner in the hallway, you give it a little tug and go shooting down the hall around the corner and back into the vacuum. Yeah, I know that.
So what's new other than the surgery?
Not much, man. I'm still busy. I start my master's next week.
Nice. Master's in just
it's a Master of Science in Aeronautics, specializing in space operations. And I may actually just go straight Master of Science in Space Operations. We'll see.
Wow. And are you planning on doing anything with that, or are you just educating yourself for fun, or
both?
Okay.
The end state is not entirely clear.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of me that like it's fascinating stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the amount of things that I've learned just getting my 2 undergrad degrees in science, in aeronautics, have been, it's just been incredible. Like really, really unique insights that I didn't have in the last, 20 years, even as a pilot, right? As an aviation professional, I didn't have those things. And now all of a sudden, it's like all these really neat insights that I got. And all these other dots have been connected that have opened up other things. And so my interests have changed quite a bit. I just took an aerospace physiology class, which was just fascinating. The professor was actually a U.S. Air Force flight surgeon. Yeah, and he was with the Thunderbirds for a while, and quite a fascinating guy. Really interesting anecdotes, really fascinating feedback, and just the rabbit holes you go down.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So when I think about that, and then I think of the plan ahead for a master's, you kind of stop and go, okay, well, if I found all these other avenues along the undergrad routes, what will I find now in the graduate routes?
Yeah.
So, we'll see. I mean, I've got a really fascinating prof for my first two classes who used to work at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay.
And it's got a lot of insights in propulsion systems, imaging. A lot of what you do in the space ops world is remote imaging.
Yeah.
Because it's satellites, right? Like things that we do with satellites a lot, we look at the Earth.
Yeah.
That's whether we're looking at a physical, if we're looking at a visible light image, or we're looking at something in the IR spectrum, the infrared spectrum, or the non-visible lights. We do that. We do that for weather. We do it for oceanography. We do it for studying the atmosphere. We do it even for just tracking aircraft, right? Or your GPS. You think the wave coming down to your GPS unit, it's just it's electromagnetic wave, right? So it's not necessarily imaging, but we do a lot of stuff on Earth and for the Earth from space. So a big part of it is not just how do we make a spaceship, but it's how do we use that to benefit.
Yeah, how do we use it, and how does it affect us? And there's so much to it. I guess I can take these sunglasses off my head.
Sun doesn't set in Cool Town, man.
Yeah. I like that.
But yeah, so I'm wearing a hat inside.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's cool. Oh man, I had a good question for you and I can't remember what it was. Yeah, is it online?
So it's through Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which has a worldwide campus. So they do predominantly work online. The interesting thing about the university, though, is that is by design and not by effect. So where you have the last few years of schools that had to move and migrate their programs online, they didn't know how to do it. Right?
Yeah, because they're not. Yeah, they weren't used to it, and Stacey went through that.
Yeah, so probably a lot of like YouTube videos.
Well, even just figuring out, and she's in a major university, but even just for the professors to figure out the new programs and how to deliver a class online and how to the logistics of which button do I hit to answer a question, or how do people mute things and all that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of logistics that need to be figured out even at the operational stage.
Completely. Yeah. Well, and there's unless you have a prof, I think, who's been diligent at recording themselves, right, and putting things out there having been recorded before.
Yeah,
there's not a lot out there that they could draw on, right? Well, so
you and I have talked about this before. I think it boggles my mind that we don't have in Canada and the US and lots of countries. It boggles my mind why we don't have free education. Put it all online, make it 100% free, and then let's say you get, I don't know, some type of workshop certificate or whatever you want to call it. And then let's say you're taking a university course. Let's say I want to become a nurse or a doctor or whatever. Take all the courses that I can online, and then I get some type of certificate saying that I've passed all these courses. And within a certain time frame, if I decide I want to get the actual degree, I have to fund myself to come down and do whatever in-person things need to be done. The money that you would rake in from, if you just put it all online for anybody to do for free, think of the advertisement money. And
well, if you look up MOOCs, massive online open course, I think they are. Okay. A lot of universities do them. They put their stuff out. There's an app on a website called Coursera. I think it's Course, C-O-R. Well, I should get my money back. C-O-U-R S-E-R-A, Coursera.
But do they charge for it?
So you can go through all of the materials, and then if you want credit for it, then you have to pay a fee, is my understanding. So you can still pay a fee,
which is understandable.
Yeah, and you don't get support. Like if you took a class in, I don't know, whatever, basket weaving, you're not going to get you're not going to be able to get feedback. I think some schools will, leave the door open for you to get feedback. Like you could submit for something.
At an extra fee or whatever.
Well, even if the prof just wanted to take a look, if they thought what you had promised, they'd say, hey, you know what? I see you've been engaged. You're doing this for free. I'm going to give you a quick shot of feedback. So you can do that. It does exist, but I guess the thing, if you take it to go back to COVID schools shutting down and everything, and high school and junior high and elementary kids going online, there's an interesting argument moving forward. Maybe your brother's got some insights on this, because your brother's a teacher, right?
Most of my family are all teachers. Yeah.
There you go. I don't understand why you can't put somebody in a classroom anytime. If every teacher during a lecture had a webcam going and just allowed a student. So say, I don't want you to go to school sick.
Right? Exactly.
But you're well enough
exactly
to be able to participate in something and still get that info. Especially if you're you're a high school kid, you're home with mono, whatever gross kissing disease you get these days. Why you can't still tap in to the class is
so you're not
beyond me.
Yeah.
And
so there should be options. And again, I don't know. I think we've had this conversation before. I don't know what the exact answer is, but there should be an option for both, right? Because it's like when you teach anything to anybody, right? Everybody learns things different ways, and that's what a good teacher is they're able to reach these students by showing it. They're able to reach these students by telling how it works, and they're able to reach, there's different methods of teaching, different methods of learning. And I think there should be an option to do, I don't know why the government of Canada hasn't come out and said, here's our online course from whatever grade primary to grade 12 or whatever. And anybody that takes this course, we know exactly what you learned. We approve the course. We know exactly what was said by the teacher. We know, we know what you did for homework. We know what you did. And we know that it's met the standards. And then I don't know how you would go about giving the actual certificates, like, hey, you passed grade 3 or you passed grade whatever, but there's different options for doing that. So I think you could find they just did it, so it's doable. But to do it right across the board, then everybody has, because let's say you grew up in Alberta and I grew up in Nova Scotia. So, and that's on opposite sides of the country, but picture you grew up in this, we grew up in the same school, but you had different teachers than I did.
Yeah.
We're both getting a different, like, you can say, okay, well, there's a curriculum that they have to follow and they have to teach. Okay, I get it. But you're still getting a different education than I am. You just made reference 100%. To it. Yeah. Because you have a really good professor right now.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, who gave you lots of different anecdotes, and like it's, I think, to
and
kind
different
of
ways to interact.
Huh?
And different ways to interact, right?
Yeah.
Like they like, and this is where, again, it has to be by design, not effect.
Yeah.
So the design that I encounter is where you have profs where, like, I am emailable.
Yep.
I can be picked up on the school's version of like Skype or Zoom.
Yep.
They have office hours, where they just sit in there like we would here.
Yeah.
And if you need to chat, you just log in and you can sit and
like,
chat. Or some of them are like, hey, you could send me a text, send me, like, you're like, man, you're just accessible. Then you have discussions in writing, or you could record a video, or you could say, we're going to do a live session with a bunch of students.
Yep.
And record it like we are right now.
Yeah. And I can see your screen. You can mark on the screen just like a chalkboard.
When I was doing math, I had to redo a whole bunch of math because my high school math was
less than desirable.
Yeah, subterranean. I had to go back and do a bunch of math, and I felt stupid. Ironically, now I love math.
Well, and you probably retain it differently than what you did when you were a kid, right? Like,
100%. Like right now, I look at, like, I think of calculus. Like before calculus, I was like, oh, my heart would be pounding and everything else. My impression of it now is so much different now that I understand how to use it. When you have a teacher or a prof that you can say, hey, I'm really not getting something, and they say, okay, cool, come to, log into my office, and then we'll sit there, and then they put up a board, and sit there and write it out.
This is what I've been saying about,
and like, you can do this in any school. You could literally do this in any school. I don't understand the hang up. I don't. And I think I have a theory.
Okay.
I don't know. I think a lot of it is based in unions.
Yeah.
I think there's an aversion.
Which is unfortunate, but probably true.
Yeah. I think there's an aversion to having, because I've mentioned this to a few teachers in time. I'm like, from COVID time, the one thing I think we should take with us is the ability to keep students engaged and keep them in the classroom when they can't physically be there.
Yeah.
What if you're just going to go
when they choose not to be there?
Well, yeah, maybe
there's a lot of kids getting bullied, and you know what I mean. Like, there's give them another option. Because there's pros and cons to both, right? I think if you have a whole society that was raised on online learning, it's there's pros and cons to that, and vice versa. I think there's pros and cons to the way we've been doing it.
If you can have a balance where you can get real life in there too.
Yes.
This is why university is a different bear, right?
Yeah.
In university, if you're a mature learner, like if you're our age, and you go back to school to do a certificate, a diploma, degree, whatever, you probably have something real world that is sustaining you, or has historically sustained you, that you can draw on. I don't think in the elementary and junior high grades, I don't think that's effective. I think even in high school, it's questionable.
Yeah.
Because you need that structure, you need that setup. But to your point, just get a long road to a small house here. You mentioned how we get different educations wherever we go. And this ties into my point about why I think the unions are so against this, and why some teachers are adversarial to it. It is ridiculously politicized. When you look at curriculums, how curriculums bounce back and forth based on the whims of a government and an education minister, who's in fact, why is it different in Nova Scotia and Alberta? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows.
Yeah.
We can't agree on a universal
interesting,
a universal level of education, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can we put together a list of things that all Canadians should be able to do? Right. And then say, can we teach that? But then somebody gets in and says, okay, now it's political, right? Because they have an idea. And this is where you have things like something as simple as when we were young, sex ed. Sex ed is not simple now. It is incredibly politically charged. It gets people's backs up. Yep. I think it probably got people's backs up even then, where they're like, hey, grade 4, you're learning this?
Well, Stacey and I were talking about sex ed the other night. We were in the hot tub and we were talking about a similar conversation, and we were talking about sex ed, not that way.
I'm sure you were, yeah.
But we were talking about how much of a joke it is, because even when I learned sex ed, there was questions that I had as a young boy, and I was excited to learn about it, because obviously you're embarrassed to ask questions and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Or if you have parents that you don't feel comfortable talking to about that sort of thing, or, so I had questions that I was excited to learn about. And I went into sex ed going, okay, I'm going to be educated on sex. I'm going to know all there is to know. Right.
Yeah.
What a joke. What a joke of a course. First of all, the teacher had no idea how to teach it. Secondly, they did not feel comfortable, providing the information, which made the students not feel comfortable asking questions. I left there having more questions than before.
Yeah, which, is probably a product of also just being a kid too, right? Like, I think we need to let being a kid be awkward.
Yes.
On some level.
Yeah. But let's say
we have to guide people through that, right? Support them through that. But yeah.
But they didn't even bring up ejaculation. Like very, very simple. It'd be like teaching a math course, but not teaching how to add. Do you know what I mean? Like you're going straight to calculus, right? You're not teaching the basics.
Well, it's a very awkward conversation anyway. Yeah. Right. So when you put people who are probably not the most comfortable with it. Now, that being said, I don't want somebody who's super comfortable with it either.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
That's a good point. But this is again why it would be nice to have it, because if as a parent, which I'm not, but as a parent, like if I could go online and go and watch the video first and go, okay, I'm comfortable with my son or daughter watching this and learning from this, right? Like I know, okay, they forgot that. I'll probably have to talk about whatever they missed or what. Like again, there's pros and cons. But even you mentioned the education minister.
Yeah.
Like why are we not teaching more life skills? Like why are we not teaching finances?
Why I never learned to do my taxes and career and life management.
Yeah.
I didn't learn. I mean, I think we did a budget, but I guess at the end of the day, like the people who should be teaching these things should be experts in those fields to the point that it is clinical. So that they're devoid of you almost want somebody who's devoid of biases, right? Which is impossible to find, but at least minimized. So when you get that person teaching that, teaching those kids this human sexuality or sex ed classes, whatever they call them these days, we put in career and life management, health class. You want somebody who is clinical enough with it that they can teach the main teaching points,
right?
But who's also educated enough and cognizant enough of the consequences of going too far.
Yeah. And
because as we because we both talked about it already, like with surgeries, you don't want to know too much, right? You want to know enough. You want to say, okay, here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is the framework we're working within. If something goes wrong, we're going to do this. These are the contingencies. Here's the consequences of it. And that's where, so like with my surgeon last week, no bedside manner. Nothing. Like The closest thing I got to bedside manner was in the OR. I was laying there, kind of like a hot dog. And then I saw him walk by the foot of the bed. He put his hand on my feet and looked over me and just looked at me and said, did you empty your bladder? That's it. That's it. So I find that I actually found through this whole journey that the clinical clerks, like the med students, his surgical fellow that was there, they were awesome, right? But again, I'm kind of okay with the expert being sterile.
Yeah, he comes in, does his job, and gets out. Everybody else does all the
yeah. So, you kind of, and it's on some level, you want the same thing with somebody teaching delicate topics like that, where they're like, look, I'm analytical. I'm going to tell you the way it is, but I'm only going to go so far. Yeah. And I'm also going to tell you these are the consequences. And because I know these consequences, we're not going to do this.
Now, here's the question. People, do they start with that type of program, very minimal, very basic early on, and then kind of gradually, almost like a math course, you start out with math in whatever grade 1 or something, and then
I'm sure they probably do. I'm sure they probably do. But I would argue now they've muddied the water so bad in some parts of the world.
Political stuff.
When you start talking about it, you have kids who can't understand physical boundaries of like, keep your hands and your feet to yourself. You think they can understand this notion that boys and girls are not boys and girls, and they can be he, him, she, her, they, them, all these other things, which whatever. You do you. I'm not going to subscribe to it. I'm not buying it. That doesn't mean you can't sell it. Not a product for me. But I guess my point is that I think they've gotten into the weeds to a point that is probably not sustainable for kids to get anything practical out of it. I suspect later on we're going to find some kids who are very confused.
Well, you're starting to take mental health and medical situations and blur them with sex ed,
life, just day to day normal
life. Yeah. And I think that's where it gets difficult for a lot of people. I think each individual is entitled to their own, whatever it is that you want to be. But now it's the pendulum has swung too far, because it's like, if I call you a he or a him or a whatever, and all of a sudden you've determined yesterday that you're no longer identifying as that, it's almost like I'm the immediate bad guy, because and they call it assuming. They've taken words like assuming and made it
terrible, man.
And I, if you look at me and say, hey, I'd really appreciate if you called me such and such.
Yeah.
And I say, fuck you, and then deliver a derogatory term, and then continue to say, like, call you whatever I want.
Yeah.
I think that there's an issue with that. But I also think that the issue relies, obviously it's coming from me. I've created the issue because you were nice, you informed me what you wanted, you communicated effectively, but the issue falls on your shoulders. You then need to decide, okay, I was quite respectful. I articulated myself properly. Now it's my decision whether or not I hang out with this fool again or not.
100%.
Right? Like
100%.
That's all there is to it.
If you, this is
But I
if it
shouldn't go to
bothers you to
jail
be,
for 25 years because
no, if it bothers you to be called a name by somebody, right? Which is,
yeah,
I mean,
that's
kind of
essentially what it is. Yeah.
what we're talking about, to be called the wrong name.
Especially
So
when it's not intended to be insulting.
it
Because intention has a lot to do with it.
requires a an intent, a level of intent, like an intent to hurt somebody's
Actus
feelings,
reus,
right?
mens reus.
100%. The guilty mind, the guilty act, right?
Yeah.
If that's your intent, if someone called you a shithead in school, or they're like, you know, you're a douchebag or whatever the name was, you would just say that this person is a bully, and you just stay away from them. Like, that is the life skill. That was the coping mechanism. And then we surround ourselves, right, then with people who are good to us. And so if you find people who just don't understand that you want to be whatever, but before we get too far from that, the choice on, I don't want to call it a choice, because I want to be delicate about that.
Yeah.
But did you hear about Demi Lovato?
No.
You know, the singer?
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. So like last year, I can call her she because she's changes now. She decided she wanted to be they, them.
Okay.
As a pronoun.
Okay.
Fine. Whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. Which, as far as English goes, kind of
doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make any grammatical sense. But
you know, I asked them, you know, what do they want to do? And then just, I think it was just in the last day or something, she's decided that she's now she, her again. So if this is something that can just be the
exactly
thing, the thing of the day, and people are going to be hitting a moving target all the time,
exactly,
you can't expect people to be tolerant of that. They might follow along with you a little bit if it is a difficult journey for you. But I think people are going to be like, okay,
because they feel like they need to, because then they're going to get caught on camera not going along with it. So they're like, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, no, that's okay, right? Like,
yeah, and this thing about like canceling people for, you know, dead naming or getting somebody's, you know what, I don't know who was the one from Juno.
Oh yeah. She's from Halifax or something, isn't she?
Yeah, she's Canadian, right? Yeah. Now is Elliot Page, but was Ellen Page before?
Okay.
Right? I think is who it was.
I knew there was something.
Elliot Page has now,
don't know specifics.
Has now transitioned to be Elliot Page. As Jordan Peterson rightfully pointed out, do you go back now and change the credits?
It's true.
On the movies? It's
true. And here's my thing. And I love a lot of what Jordan Peterson says about this sort of thing. I also watched an interview with someone, I don't remember who it was with. I didn't know the interviewer or the interviewee, but the interviewee was see if I can get this correct. I think it was a male that used to be a female, like a female that transitioned to a male, and they had an excellent point. Why is it not okay? Like, we need to be making the conversation needs to be about, it has to be okay to say, I'm a male now, but I used to be a female. Okay, cool. Are you happy? Because that's the real, like, are you happy? That's all I care about. What's your name? I don't care. Because it's that's what it really comes down to is, are you happy? And at which the subsection of that is, you know, why did you do it? Did you do it because you're looking for attention, which unfortunately some people are? Or did you do it because you have some inner demons that, and I say inner demons in the sense that I have never experienced it, but if I honestly felt like I was female and I'm in a male's body, that to me would be terrifying. That would be horrible. and there are lots of people that are experiencing that, and that's very unfortunate. So, but there also are people who go through with the transition and regret it because they did it because it's the flavor of the year, right? Like it's the flavor of the decade.
Well, and I think the answer to the question of why is actually one you don't want to answer. And when I say you don't want to answer it, I mean the people pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were to push and say, why'd you do that? And you kept going, like, you kept asking why,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually get down to the nitty gritty of it. As soon as you get to a place, let's say that levels out at, I felt awkward as a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't every teenager feel awkward?
Right?
Yeah.
If you go deeper, and then if you start to find things like, well, this is the way I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like I don't, well, I think it requires a lot of, and I know people are trying to do this, but I think there's a lot of people with good intentions, but there are people who just say, nope, you felt it once, that's enough for me.
Well, and that's I think that's what bothers me. It's like racism, because I mean I have a couple, but I have a close friend that I used to work with who transitioned, did a full transition, and he's used to be a girl and now he's a boy and he's happy as a clam.
Yeah.
So I feel good when somebody is doing what makes them happy, because whatever that is,
as long as that's genuine,
exactly,
change for them,
exactly, and it doesn't affect me. Why like I don't have an opinion on it other than if I'm not allowed to force you in this direction, then you shouldn't be allowed to force me in this direction. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
But by all means, if somebody wants to do a transition, or somebody wants to be called a water bottle, or a male or a female, or he, she, or they, or that, it doesn't bother me at all, and I have no issues with it whatsoever. I have an issue with,
I actually have no issues with not even calling them anything and not even associating with them if it bothers me that much.
Exactly.
For the same reason that they're probably not going to want to associate with me.
Exactly.
Right?
That I read a meme the other day, and it was basically what you just said. Oh man, I'm gonna mess it up.
Google it.
Your offense, you being offended, doesn't constitute an emergency.
It doesn't make you right.
Like that. Yeah, yeah. And I full-heartedly agree with that. It's like people that say, oh, why are you posting that on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram? Well, if you don't like it, don't read it. Don't look at it. Delete me.
So having left social media, I would tell you right now that the influence of social media is you can't even describe. I
got rid of it for a couple of months back, and it was one of the best things I've ever done.
It's so caustic.
I was going to say, it's the whole gender thing is a lot like racism, in the sense that what bothers me about those subjects is that, there are some people that have a real hormone imbalance. There are some people who are experiencing real racism, and they're on the flip side, there's people that are taking advantage of this limelight to get attention. And that's scary, because it takes away from the actual racism. It takes away from the people that actually legitimately feel like this is right for them. And it really, really, really irks me that people are taking, because it's these are very serious topics, very serious things.
Yeah.
And to take away from them just for your own, what's the flavor of the decade going to be next year?
Well, this is, everybody wants to be special, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to be special. And I think if people just followed the logic just a little, you don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole. But if everybody were special, nobody would be special.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you're not special. I'm not special. Nobody's special. You have to work to be special.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It takes work to do big things, to change society takes work. That doesn't come from coercion. That doesn't come from this comes from drawing out a path that people generally look at and say, hey, that looks all right.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with being awkward. There's nothing wrong with not being special. Who cares? But this need to have friends and followers and everything else has paralleled this sudden need for attention all the time, and to be validated all the time. Sometimes your problems are just your problems.
Exactly.
They're just your problems.
Exactly.
And you need to deal, because everybody else had to, and it'll be fine. But access the resources you have, do what you need to do. But the impact on my life of
the other side
somebody
of that
else's,
is everybody has problems.
Don't think you're special, that your problems are unique.
Everybody.
This is where the thing of feeling like an awkward teenager, congratulations. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know what? How about nothing? We'll just carry on.
Mm-hmm.
Go be awkward. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Go sift through, because those are life lessons you're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be valuable. Right.
But nobody's got it figured out. That's why the conversation needs to be, are you happy?
Yeah. And if you need help, it's okay. Yeah. Right. It's okay to ask for help. But this idea that that the world must bend for you.
Oh God.
Okay. Let whatever. I can't change the fact that the world must bend right now. What about when it either breaks and it can't bend anymore, or someone says at that point, maybe they either get it back and they say, we're not bending anymore, or worse, it breaks and says, look, you broke it.
Yep.
Because you made it bend. What do you do then? And so like the political stuff, even with education, same thing here in Alberta, is a big flip-flop on education things, and there's big curriculum discussions and whatnot. You see the politicization of it, and you see the sway that different lobby groups have to move the goalposts a bit. You see the unions get involved, and there's people who don't even know the unions are involved. I got into it on social media when I was still on there, with some people that were part of the Alberta Teacher Association. Like, they were outwardly, their profile photo was a ATA, had an ATA backdrop and everything else. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were very clear of identifying themselves. They were articulate and relatively respectful, but yeah, they were legit. I looked them up. But anyway, the point is, I had to point out fact. And it blew my mind. If you're going to go, the argument at the time was about schools being shut down for COVID. And I was like, well, you got to start considering the unintended consequences. You're going a bridge too far. You're overstaying your welcome. You're losing people. No one's going to support you anymore. If you want to keep this unattainable goal up of, well, the kids can go back, but it has to be safe. So we need new ventilation. We need smaller class sizes. We need, all the, with what?
Yeah.
Those things aren't going to happen. So what? We're not going back to school. So you're holding our kids hostage. They're just in my custody. Right? You're holding the school hostage from my kids then.
Yeah.
If you don't want to say you're holding the kids hostage, you're holding the school hostage.
Yeah.
And keeping it from our kids. And they're like, no, we're not. We haven't demanded.
And you're not providing any other options.
Certainly not viable ones. And they would say, no, we are not demanding that. We have never once demanded that. Bullshit. And then you go and you find the big letter that had like 20 different unions in as signatories to it that were requesting lockdowns and everything else of society. And in there, who's there? Alberta Teacher Association.
Yeah.
So many people don't understand what happens up at the top. They think that when they send an email that because they're special, right? They think that everybody listens to them. That ain't how it works. It's not how it works. These are purely political organizations. And I'm a union guy. I believe, I've heard it before, companies get the unions they deserve, right? I would love to work for an organization in my life where I never felt that I needed to have a union.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we could all agree, if we thought about it in our heart of hearts, we would like to work for an organization where doing the right thing is the rule, not the exception.
Sure.
Right? So, that being said, you see these groups that are driving this. They drive it. And so, back to the original point there about keeping webcams out of schools, and then to tie in with biases that you get from teachers, even acting out that you may see from children from time to time, things like that. I get there's reasonable explanations as to why, but there's also reasonable ways in 2022 to mitigate.
Yeah. Well, and how much has the curriculum changed in the last 50 years?
And why does it keep changing? Why, this whole thing, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit and tell me the science is settled and then tell me we're actually going to change this because it changed. We settled it. No, fuck.
But this is the whole, Nick, this is the whole problem with, I mean, it goes right up to the top of the food chain with politics, right? Like when decisions are being made in reasons other than the best interest than the ones they're being made for, you get problems. And that's what's happening in politics right now. We don't have a leader at the moment, and haven't for a while, that is willing to stand up and say no. And
or just draw that picture for society.
Yep.
That says, like, look, we can go there.
Yep.
We can go there. The person who's willing to go to the other side of the horizon and be like, hey, you know what I found? There's a really cool place over there. Let's go check it out.
Yep. And it's
somebody that you believe, who you believe went there, genuinely saw something cool.
Yeah.
And is now coming back to share that. You have like
have
American.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just gonna say, like, have somebody that made mistakes, right? Like I think that's why people voted for Donald Trump. Whether you like him or not, I think people were excited about somebody who had made mistakes, who seemed like, an everyday normal person, in the sense that, didn't grow up in politics, didn't have a career-long politic adventure,
didn't have a massive vocabulary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was, in a lot of people's eyes, he was the people's choice, and obviously he won. And I don't think it worked out for them in the long run, but I think that's why he won. I think people are looking for somebody who's willing to come out and say, look, I'm not perfect, but I'm also not going to pay people off to hide my imperfections. And I'm also not going to spend millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars trying to point out the other candidate's flaws so that I can win.
Or even just change the game and pick which candidate you want to run against.
What do you mean?
Well, there was this thing that just happened a little while ago. I'd have to look it up and find the actual details on it. But there was a Democratic, and it's in the US, a Democratic, I can't remember what level it was at. It doesn't matter because it's the spirit of it that remains the same. That ran an ad for their opponent. They picked the opponent that they thought would make the most ridiculous statements, would say things
And then
in
tried to
such a
make
way,
them look good
in a Trumpian kind of way, and then put an ad out for them. So they gave them the platform to allow them to do those things.
Give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Exactly. Right. And it wasn't until people were looking at the ad and they're like, well, at the bottom it says paid for by whatever. It's like, wait a minute, it's paid for by the opponent. So this is a game. This is a game that's being played.
Yeah.
Right. There's no two ways about it.
And you're talking millions, billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. I got to find this paid for ad of Republican. I got to find it. From June 20th. NPR, why Democrats are paying for ads supporting Republican primary candidates. Democrats are buying ads supporting far-right GOP primary candidates in the hopes of facing them in the general election, a strategy that former Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri tried in 2012. I mean,
if I take my logical head off and I put my head in that particular game, it's a, as they say in dodgeball, it's a bold move, Peyton. I hope it pays off.
Well, what they're effectively doing, I mean, you want to maintain, if you look at this from a strategy standpoint, right? Military mind or not, you want to pick the time and the place, right? So, there's no
stack the odds
better way. Yeah, if you don't have the ability to necessarily win that fight, if you're in an asymmetrical confrontation where you don't maybe have the power on your own to do it, because I think increasingly the Democrats, the left, the liberals here in Canada are having a difficult time attaining their goals without the help of the right, and their natural sort of flubbing and follies and gaffes and things like that. They tend to say, like, oh man, like, why do you have to say those things? Like, you just make us all sound crazy sometimes. And I say us all like I'm on the right. I'm not. I just say, like, you make us all who are just kind of just trying to exist, who won't support that, seem crazy, right? So you have to pick. You have to maintain the initiative, and you have to pick the time and place where the confrontation will take place. You want to have that fight in school, and you want to meet the kid at the monkey bars, you make him go out those doors. Right now, is at the monkey bars. You've picked the time and place of the fight, right? Yeah. Because if you didn't want to have that fight, you didn't go out that door to the monkey bars.
Exactly.
It's simple. Yeah. Right. So you have to drive, and so it's very strange, and I don't like feeling like a pawn. And you see the incompetence, and you see the fracturing happening. Well, look what's happening with the Democrats right now, even from Nancy Pelosi, who's in Taiwan, right? Even though the president of the United States, or some people like to call him former Vice President Joe Biden, he told her not to. There's no shortage of people who said don't go, and now China is having live fire exercises in the air and in the waters around Taiwan. So what could go wrong here? She flies out. What could go wrong? Right? I mean, why would you set out to do these things when you know there is a negative consequence? Why would you do that? And why can't they even agree amongst themselves? And I think the reality is some of them are seeing the light sooner rather than others, right? As a threat to their power, a threat to the establishment, whatever it may be. But you can only push rope so far. And some of these people seem more in tune with that notion than others. And others, you're like, man, you are hook, line, and sinker dedicated to this cause. And now you start to see, to that point too, you see the media driving these things. And now you start to see people in media, Chris Cuomo being an example from CNN, who's now coming out saying that effectively media has to change. You were the one.
I know.
If there was a usual suspect of somebody in media who was polluting the waters every day,
yeah,
right? So it starts to feel like a game. They say and do
100%.
whatever gets them.
100%. And what bothers me is that there's no accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there have been rises towards accountability, right?
But no actual.
We don't have formalized means of accountability because that would require accountability.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have ethics and all these other things, but that's garbage, right?
Well, and as soon as they start talking about it, it gets buried.
Exactly. People are running the blitz. They cover. Yeah. I mean, you put all these things together. At the end of the day, you get to this place where you're like, well, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. You and it's crazy to say it, but you get
it. Like Stacey and I were talking about this the other day. If you look at corrupt governments, known corrupt governments, there is, now granted, I'm saying this, not having lived in any of these countries, there's part of me that would almost rather live in some of those countries that have known corrupt governments, because at least you know what you're up against. Oh, okay, if I get caught doing this, it's going to cost me this much.
Yeah,
right?
The police officer's coming by every week to collect his
but it's
50 or $100.
Yeah. Whereas here, I find they're just, I don't even want to say very good at, but they are, because it's working. They're very good at masking their corruption, because that's what it is. It's corruption. There has been criminal activity. There has been mismanagement of resources. There has been, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And there's been no accountability.
Yeah.
There has been, huge scandals, whether it be financially or otherwise, that were covered up. Where do you draw the line between that and?
Well, and this is where people are growing. People are not as dumb as I always thought. I just read an article yesterday. I don't know where to track it down. Here. Yes.
The other thing, I think you and I talked about it too, is that the world's getting smaller. Like, why do I have to be, if you can choose to be a female or a male or a water bottle or whatever, why do I have to be a Canadian who is not legally allowed to live in another country simply because I was born here? What happens if I identify as an American or?
So this is actually a very challenging point, because I believe you get to what is known as, I just want to make sure I got the term right. I believe is it irredentism? It's related, kind of. That's the policy of advocating the restoration to a country or a territory formerly belonging to it. I can't remember what the what it is called, but when you do have people, when you have, say, stateless nations, which you're not allowed to actually have, right? Like, that's according to the UN, right? You can't be stateless person.
The freedom of the land type thing.
But they exist, right? We have the Kashmir region, throughout the Middle East. You have the Kurds, right? Jewish people, right? So it's an interesting point you bring up, because if you were, say, Jewish here, but you fly the Israeli flag? What if you identify as an Israeli? Right? I have Dutch stuff all over the place.
Exactly.
At what point is my behavior representative, of my being a Dutchman? I guess, and it's kind of it's an outrageous thought, but
is it?
If my favorite, if the Dutch national team, loses the World Cup in the final, and I'm at a bar, pub with a bunch of Dutch football fans, and we go and topple statues. Did I do that in the name of the Dutch? Who's responsible for me? It is an interesting philosophical question. I mean, it's absurd, but if I went to Europe, football firms are very common, right? That's a thing. The clubs, right? And like one of my favorite teams in Holland, they have one of the worst football firms in all of Europe. So, and they burn shit down, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. But this is socially acceptable. What they do. There. This is just what they do. What if I get a membership as a Canadian, right? What happens to me if I do something in that name? Now, and people, it does sound a little bit ridiculous, but start tying in other things, where what we've done over the years with how we identify and label terrorists. Because you do live in a country now where to fly a Canadian flag on the back of your truck, people look at you and they'll think you're a terrorist, right? In fact, the definition of terrorism has changed to just somebody trying to get anything through intimidation and whatnot, or make a political impact. And it's not as clear as it was in the time of, say, the IRA, where a terrorist put out a pipe bomb. And it wasn't just intimidation. That wasn't it, because everybody gets intimidation is so subjective, right?
You took the words out of my mouth.
Right? If you're just a bigger person, I'm like, okay, I get it. Yep. What? So they're a terrorist now because they're bigger?
Yep.
Because that's
and do police and military follow into that? Because
arguably
that's the tool that they use a lot of the time, whether it's
you have to be asymmetrical, right? You have to be bigger than the one you're trying to control, right? You have to win to maintain that power. So
it's literally on the use of force continuum, police officer presence.
Yes. And so you get to a place where, by definition, you are getting into very, very dangerous territory, where the idea of what is a terrorist is very subjective. And I don't think it's always the people. I just don't. I'm not saying that our governments are there, but by definition, if you follow the definition.
The fact that he invoked the emergency act was like, oh my God, I love to hear your spin on that, because I felt like puking, fainting, and
so I just want to go back to the terrorist thing. I just did the Google definition. This is from Oxford. A person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. Okay, so a person,
which is literally what police and military do.
The only thing is that it's lawful.
Yeah.
It's authorized.
It's only lawful because they're doing it under a political guidance.
Right. Which is why ethics and values is so sought after in these organizations, right? Because you have to make that line finer, right? And put a finer point on it.
Yep.
So a person who uses unlawful violence, okay, the fact of the matter is that the military and police and other groups, they can wage legitimate violence. That's what they do. And intimidation. especially against civilians. So especially, so it doesn't necessarily just have to be against civilians,
Yeah.
right? It's especially, but it's particularly heinous when it is.
Yeah.
In the pursuit of political aims. The pursuit of political aims part is very troubling by the definition, because what isn't politicized now?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've politicized education and you've politicized
Gender,
health, I mean, anything that
race.
you've politicized race, you've politicized gender, you've politicized schools, you've politicized science, you've politicized education institutions, all these things,
Mm-hmm.
there is no room for dissension there.
Mm-hmm.
Because to go against it, not even just violence, even though it says violence and intimidation,
Mm-hmm.
but intimidation, you have people who now say words are violence.
Which is
So the definition of violence, you're like, okay, well, where did that start? Where did I start being violent? That's based on someone's perspective and opinion.
Yep.
So to become violent and intimidating, especially against civilians, it's not a long walk if you're trying to do something against a politicized organization. So the fact that we just call people terrorists and we say that willy-nilly is disgusting to me, because
well, it's like the gender thing, it's like the racism, it takes away from actual real terrorism, which is disgusting.
And this is where what happens when you do face true terrorism. I mean, we've seen that, and I don't know. It plays into this idea that we lack resilience and we want safe spaces and everything else.
Yeah.
And if you take those voices out of the public eye, they start to happen privately, and that's when they get scarier.
Yeah. When
we have conversations in basements, that is where the real far right, air quotes, comes out. Right? That's where you get people who are sitting in the basement and they're like, I'm really glad we could have this conversation. What can we do about this?
Mm-hmm.
This is really a safe place. And they start having crazier and crazier conversations and crazier. This is where radicalization happens. You want that conversation to happen publicly, so that who you're up against or who you have to be leery of. Nope. This idea of being canceled now, why would you have that conversation in public? Why would you put a target on your back?
Yep.
I'm going to do it where I can, not me, but I'm going to be safe, go to my safe space with people I know best.
Yep.
And I'm going to have that conversation quietly. And that's where we're going to radicalize. And that's where it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And we're going to do stupid shit. Like, it's not to label people as terrorists. If you then go and say, you're a terrorist, I'm going to treat you as such. We're going to take your bank accounts. We're going to do all these things to you. We're going to make life effectively miserable for you. Mm-hmm. The exact same thing that we would do to somebody who
is an actual terrorist,
who sent a pipe bomb to a judge who was working on a big case, blew up an airplane, did all these things. Well, you're going to have the crazies who say, well, you're going to treat me like that anyway. Mm-hmm. So I might as well. Mm-hmm. It's the old saying of, if you're going to fuck it up, fuck it all the way up.
Yep. Right?
When those people have nothing to lose. And that is the scary part.
Yeah.
That's where I get terrified.
In the jail system, right? Like when we worked in the jail, as soon as that person has nothing to lose, man, if they feel like they are being mistreated in any way or shape or form, good fucking luck.
They're a herd animal who's gonna destroy everything.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to be delicate. And I think we as a society have grown far too comfortable throwing words around. And Mike Tyson, what did Mike Tyson say?
Yes.
Once, like,
something
like you've grown too comfortable saying things without the fear of somebody punching you in the face.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very important to have a moderate level of fear.
Yep.
For at least for your not for your well-being, but for the consequences of saying something either out of turn or without the due respect to the other human being that you're talking to.
Because there's such a thing as free speech, but you need to be aware that sometimes your speech can get you into trouble, you know, and that doesn't make that right. I'm not, you know, we're not trying to incite violence, but like I think what you're saying is that there's it's like we said earlier, two wrongs don't make a right. You know, if you're going to sit there and say, you know, you guys are wrong because we're offended, well, the whole being offended thing, where do you draw the line? Because if we're going to change the world because you're offended, well, maybe I'm offended that you're offended to the point where the world's changing.
Yeah.
So now do we change it back because I'm offended? Well, how come we changed it when you were offended?
Well,
do you know what I mean? Like where do we draw the line? Because now you're saying that your opinion is more valuable than my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and you get to a place where you just have to be careful about what you get what you want to see if you want what you get, right?
I like that.
I mean, it's true. It's like if you're going to come up with a rule, you better be prepared to live by that rule. Mm-hmm. This is, you know, laws of unintended consequences too, right? Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Could you hear me okay before too? Okay.
Yeah. It was a little crackly here and there, but that's fine.
Oh, okay. I just, you know, we need to be.
It's like the extreme feminists who, like, people want this equality, the ever elusive equality. First of all, there's not really, there's no such thing as equality. There isn't, and there never will be. Nobody's equal. That's just the way life is. I'm better at some things than you are, and you're better at most things than I am. You know what I mean? It's the way the world works, right? Like, and that's what makes the world interesting. You know, I think we need
balance, right?
Yeah, like boys.
Where I completely
girls,
lack patience,
age.
you always had patience.
Let me tell you something.
Fact.
I listened to a little
science.
Tupac myself. Inside joke.
That's one of the best lines.
I loved it. And there are people, like, I just watched a reel the other day, and again, I don't know who the people were. I don't know who the interviewer or the interviewee was, but they were on some type of podcast.
Yep.
And this girl was a very vocal feminist, and I would say an extremist of the sort. And the podcaster was a male, and they were having a big disagreement. And he said, well, wait, hold on now. You want equality for men and women, right? And she's like, yeah. He's like, well, you know, you've been in the city for a while now. Like, have you gone out to a few clubs? Oh yeah, I went out every night. And blah, blah. She's obviously a very attractive female. And she's like, yeah, I went out every night. He's like, okay. Well, out of all the times that you went to these clubs, how many times did you pay to get in? And the answer, after a long detoured route, was 0. She never paid to get into these clubs.
Yeah.
And he said, well, how is that fair to the ugly females? How is that fair to the males? And she was like, well, you know, I've never paid to get in. I don't pay for drinks. I don't pay to get in. That's just something that's just the way life is. And he's like, whoa, wait now. You want equality. That's not equality. Now what you want is equality when it works for you, when you're getting something out of it. That's not equality.
Well, I saw a meme yesterday that had a dog on it, and it was like, it said like, oh, my dog when he's eating, and the dog's got like a rifle and everything else. There's a "Don't tread on me" flag behind him, right?
Yeah.
And then the next picture was the same dog, but now wearing a big Russian hat with a red star and a hammer and sickle and everything else, and big, communist stuff behind him and everything. And it's like my dog when I'm eating, right? So it's like they're full on like freedom, don't take anything from me when they're eating, but when somebody else is eating,
yeah,
then you want
yeah,
then you want to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you and I talked about it before too. There was one where a female, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that she's a very vocal feminist as well. And she was on a train or something, and I think it was in the States, and all the seats were full, and there was a few younger males on some of the seats, and she loses it, starts screaming at them and says, "Is nobody gonna fucking stand up and let me have a seat? Is there's no such thing as chivalry anymore?" And whoever was doing the reel like had a voiceover or went back to their podcast or whatever, and he said like, so you don't actually want equality.
Yeah.
Because equality, why would I have to give up my seat because you're a female? Why would, you know what I mean? Like, and it's so interesting to me. And I think
I could be really wrong here.
Probably
I'm sure the feminists will tell me I am.
My
right there.
Sore. Yeah.
Oh, in there. So I grew up in a time where women did a lot of things. My very first flight instructor was a woman. Most of my teachers have been women.
Yeah.
Some of my best instructors at work have been women. Some of the best people I worked with as a peace officer.
I was just going to give that example. Yeah.
Some of the best cops are women.
Yeah.
My mom was a woman, ironically.
Which is a superpower in and by itself.
Right. So honestly, I don't come from a generation where I'm not the guy you're after.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not the one whose mind you have to change.
Yeah.
So when I see people talk about these things, it's the same thing as like racism. I was like, I don't know. I've had friends from all different races.
I'm not racist. I'm not sexist.
Sorry.
I'm not, so I feel you, and how can I help you? But me putting something on my Facebook profile is not going to change it.
It's not going to help your plight. The other thing, why do you need, hear me out, why do you need men's approval for that?
Are they seeking approval, or are they trying to make change?
Well, you want my implied approval by me men changing our viewpoints.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't look for that.
Just go.
If that's your oppressor, it's like it's the bully. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna try. I don't need the bully's approval. The bully can fuck off.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Yeah.
If you believe in it so deeply, and you can do it better and cleaner and smarter and blah 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 and all these.
And there's lots of people who have done it.
Go do it.
That are females or are a different race. There's lots of people.
Yeah, and you know what? So, do it this way. Don't hire men. Don't serve men. Don't do anything with men. Right? You don't need a man's approval. You don't need men to change their minds. Again, this is the leadership thing. Draw that picture of where we should go and take us there. And if it's great, it'll work.
I think that's
it's not being anti women. I'm just saying, like, you don't need a man's approval, so stop trying to change men's minds, because you know what, they're not going to. I actually think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think if there's men out there who don't support women in different things, go away. I don't have time for you either.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not a function of me thinking women are great and they can do it better and blah, blah, blah. That's just me just saying,
I don't actually
it's
care if it's a
possible.
man or a woman. I just want the best person suited for the job.
Do your fucking job and do it well.
Yeah.
And that's where I get lost in the discussion. And that's a generational thing for me and probably for you and a lot of us.
But the same thing you just explained works for race and a lot of different things. Like, oh man, who was it? Was it Denzel Washington?
I feel like Morgan Freeman had a conversation about this once.
Maybe it was, okay, Morgan Freeman.
Where racism is basically dead.
Well,
stop bringing it up.
They said in an interview, they said, let's say it was Morgan Freeman. I don't know if it was a famous actor. They got asked a question about racism, and he said, I don't really have, whatever he said, I don't want to have an opinion or whatever. And he said, no, like, I don't see racism because I choose not to, like, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, like, I don't see you as a white man. I see you as, let's say the interview's name was Eric. I see you as Eric, and you see me as Morgan Freeman or whoever was doing it. So you stop calling me a black man, and I'll stop calling you a white man, and you be you, and I'll be me. And I think that, and that's coming from somebody who was black, or whatever acceptable term is deemed to be acceptable in our society today. His skin color was black and was a very, very successful actor, entrepreneur, however you want to look at it, in Hollywood.
I feel like this is Morgan Freeman. I feel like
I want to say, I don't know if it was Morgan Freeman, Samuel Jackson, but I think it was Morgan Freeman.
I mean, I guess it's like,
I can look it up right now.
You just need to get to a place where we just can
just shut it off,
understand the human component, and it can't have political bent. Like, I know this, like, another one that's gotten me is the Ukraine situation. You're talking about government corruption and everything earlier. I just read yesterday a New York Times article, okay, that conceded that the relationship between the Ukrainian president and the United States was not as firm as people believed, or as the media would make it out to be, and reaffirmed the level of corruption there. And I've been saying this for months. I'm like, look, what is happening on a human level in Ukraine is horrific. Horrific.
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe it. But what's happening on a political level, if you can separate and distill it out, is disgusting. There's people in Ukraine, you would not have these folks over for dinner. You wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it. They are acting. And maybe we should dive a little more into that. But I guess my point here is there is no, where do you find that? Sounds like Morgan Freeman to me.
It is Morgan Freeman. But I don't know if this is the right.
But like the thing, to larger scale events like geopolitical things, and to local, like just take the kid being bullied, it just goes down to being a human being and treating other people the right way. And like, you're not going to force people into doing that. You're just going to promote a resentment. And why do all of these movements need everybody's validation? if it's so good, it'll happen on its own.
Yeah.
This is the same thing. So like if you went, say, back to that feminist thing, if you're like, you know what, women can do this better. Because what you're trying to say is we can't live without you and we should have you everywhere. Great. So have a hospital just for women, with women doctors and women nurses and everything else, and fine. Now have one for men, where you have male nurses and male doctors and just for men. And I don't know, I would venture to say that guys going to that hospital will be like, I kind of want to try that hospital over there. They seem really nice, right? We get bedside manner, you get those soft human skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, if it works, and it'll sell itself. And you shouldn't need to force the issue.
And it's okay to be it's okay to be different. So, like, why can't we? There's pros and cons to everything, right? Like I think, yeah. Anyway, Stacey and I were talking about this. Well, we've talked about it a few times over the years, but like just a few, like 2 or 3 nights ago, Tika, our dog, was laying in the bed with us, and she was cuddled in beside the two of us, upside down, snoring with her mouth open, and you could see her like sharp teeth.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is crazy that we have a completely different species that has claws and sharp teeth who could kill us while we're sleeping very easily.
Yeah.
And not only, do we share a living environment, but we relish in that, and we love each other back and forth, and we show love in different ways, and we trust each other.
Yeah.
But yet some people can't do that with another fucking human being.
But we do it with a completely different species.
But we do it with a completely different species.
They did it in Star Wars too, Chewbacca.
Yeah.
It's truly bizarre. And then you have people who say that you owning a dog is actually racism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at.
I have a feeling, I can't find who said that.
It's very, very bizarre to me, but like, yeah, that's your white privilege for some people, right? To be able to have a dog.
Yeah.
Because having a dog went back to controlling people, nothing to do with controlling herds.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so in depth, and unfortunately the loudest ones are getting the most time.
Yeah. You confuse opinion with fact.
Yeah.
And where do you, if you're trying to find human beings that have never made a mistake, never been at fault, never done anything or said anything that they shouldn't have,
yeah, good luck.
Good fucking luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So, as soon as I think, we should be able to talk about history and learn from it and grow from it and have those things not happen again. But anyway, I don't know how we always land on these deep conversations, but
that's why we do it.
What's on your wall back there? Is that He-Man?
Sorry, straight back here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, store. Just a couple of Air Force recruiting posters from World War II.
Oh, nice.
And then I got my degree up there and a bunch of space stuff. And
very nice.
My books.
How do you
Lego.
Keep such an immaculate house with such fragile things with kids?
Immaculate?
Yeah.
Dude, I like hobbled around here and did a cleanup job.
With your cane?
Today has been a caneless day.
Ooh, that's good.
No walking around with my lion cane. The lion cane. Like Rafiki.
How much did Trina hate that cane?
You know what? It's been pretty good actually. I have 2 canes actually. I have another one.
Your going out cane and your home cane?
That's actually exactly what it is. You don't want to take one outside and then bring it inside. I don't want to track stuff around. But it's, today's actually, I think, going to be a day without a cane, I think.
Good.
I think I'll take the kids out for a cruise here in a little while. It's good to move around. Like it,
Yeah.
like you know how it is. If you sit still, like waking up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I'm just in agony. And the getting moving thing takes a lot of work.
Do you find that like just since your surgery, or do you find that in your late 30s?
Oh, it's just life.
Yeah.
But it's just really pronounced now since this last week. It's definitely better today. I can move quick, like relatively quick. Nice. But then I get these really strange, I call them the piano keys in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a spasm in my stomach.
Like fasciculations?
I don't know what that is.
Like I'm your muscles enough. Twitch.
Yeah, but like big. Like my whole stomach does this.
Yeah, you can have big fasciculations, or you can have small ones. You can have deep ones that you can't see, or you can have ones that you can literally see.
Oh, yeah. This one I feel like I can look at my stomach and watch it.
Interesting.
The piano keys. And it's really unsettling. Sometimes they get these crazy spasms, like in the middle of the night. It's the opposite of whatever I'm doing. So if I'm laying flat, then all of a sudden I fold. And I'm just like, I wake up, I'm like, cool, I guess I'm sitting up now. Like,
interesting.
And my whole, like, it's like my hip, is it the hip flexor right there? And then into my ab, like right basically my pelvis there just tightens right up.
Huh.
And I'm like, ooh, and then I'm just sitting up.
And this is since the surgery?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then if the other way it'll happen, where if I'm laying with my legs up a bit, kind of fetal position or close to, then all of a sudden I just like my legs just stretch right out and it's just pain. And then I'm like, oh God. And I start doing the flailing arm, inflatable man thing. Cause I'm like, Jesus, make it stop. You know, and I find whatever God will listen to me in that moment.
Yeah.
I've gone through a few gods.
Yeah.
I'd say the results are mixed.
One of them's name is Terry.
I get responses from Satan once in a while, but no, he doesn't seem to be very helpful. Yeah, but no, I'm all right. How you been? What's going on with you? Otherwise, you feeling okay?
Good, man. I probably the best I've felt since I started getting sick.
You look good.
Yeah, I lost 42 pounds, a little over 42 pounds.
Where'd you put it?
I don't know. If I knew, I probably wouldn't have lost it. I don't know.
Last place you left it, it'll be there.
And I would say, aside from the like neurological stuff, speaking of fasciculations and twitching and myoclonic states and all that, I would say almost all of my symptoms have either completely disappeared or gotten drastically better.
Really?
Or there's one that hasn't really changed, but it's changed in the sense that it's gotten a lot more manageable.
Okay.
I started a new diet on April 4th. Okay. And man, that diet has done more for me than any injection, any medication, any surgery. It's crazy. And I feel like before I was going down, and all the doctors I was talking to were basically like, when I talked to my one of my neurologists before we moved out here, he literally said, you will either get better miraculously one day if it's the tumor and then the tumor goes away, or you're going to get much, much worse. And then proceeded to kind of like tell me to prepare, like to get my affairs in order, because I was on a downward slope. So to go from that to, the last few weeks being the first time since I got sick, thinking that I might actually be able to return to uniform duty someday. I'm off all medications.
Wow. So what have you done? What's the diet change then? What has been is there something you've put in, or is it something you've taken out?
Like, what am I doing for a diet?
Yeah. Has it been something, is there like a part of it that you've had to moderate? Is there
so essentially it's just all meat. I can have meat, poultry, fish, any animal-based product or animal byproduct. So you can have eggs. You can technically have cheese, but you got to be careful with cheese because it can be a little inflammatory, and B, most of it has sugars in it. So you have to find like good cheese, raw cheese. And then, I mean, if you wanted to, you can have insects and stuff. That's not my thing, but yeah, you can have butter. And the only other thing is you can have salt. Now I do a little bit modified, like they describe it like a spectrum, and there's some really hardcore people, and that's technically called the lion diet, which is ruminant meats, and salt and water, and that's it. And then there's people on this end, which is where I like to think I am, where I'll have meat, poultry, fish, butter, eggs, salt. There's a certain electrolyte drink that I will have every once in a while. I don't feel like I need it, but some days when I'm feeling a little low, I'll have that. But it's a very specific kind. And then I'll allow like herbs and spices. I allow Frank's Red Hot sauce. Yeah, it honestly, it's delicious. You can wake up and have and there's no, you don't weigh anything, you don't measure anything, you don't count calories.
This has to do with how it's sourced.
So they recommend that you get local grass-fed, panel massaged, all that kind of stuff if you can afford it. But they also say, and they being like, I follow a few doctors on YouTube that are really into it. And one of the doctors is from Nashville, and he said he still has a clinic, but he's planning on closing the clinic because he's helped far more people with this on YouTube than he has in his entire over 20-year practice in
Interesting
clinical world. So they'll say, like, if you can afford those meats, that's obviously better, but that's the way to go. If all you can afford is those big tubes of ground beef from Walmart, and eggs that are cage raised, or whatever the wording is, then go for it, because that's still trillion times better than anything else you're putting in your mouth. And then another doctor that I follow on YouTube actually described it really well, and because that question obviously comes up a lot. And he said, he said, obviously, if you can afford those cuts, go for it. But if you can't, he said, the difference is it's like being in the Olympics, and the gold medal goes to the grass-fed, organic, yada, yada, yada. And he said the cheap carnivore stuff that you can find anywhere is basically second place. But he said, even though you're only getting silver, you're still better than everybody else at the sport in the world, other than the gold medal people.
Departed then. You've departed almost in full then from
carbs.
And from the antithesis of the vegan.
Yes, although I have done the vegan diet. I've tried a lot of different diets in my day, whether it's for competition sports or health reasons or whatever. I've tried a lot of different ones, including vegan, juicing, a bunch of different. All this is basically it's keto on steroids. So keto is very low carbs, carnivore is no carbs. And honestly, man, like, I noticed a difference. So like, I noticed a difference within days, and then it just continuously gets better. And and I've tried deviating just recently, and it was instantaneously brutal. But like I said, I'm off all meds. I'm down over 40 pounds. I feel amazing. Like in comparison, I feel the best that I've felt in years. Even the neurological stuff isn't quite as extreme or quite as often. And to note, I'm actually doing more. Like I found, before being on this diet, I wasn't really doing a lot of anything, because anytime I would go do something, I'd have to take 3 or 4 days to recover, right? Like if I went to go mow the lawn, which I really enjoy doing, it would take me a day or two to recuperate, because my muscles were so aggravated from the day before. And that was riding a ride-on tractor. So now I find I'm doing a lot more physical stuff. I'm a lot more active throughout the day than what I have been recently. So I think that's important to note, that like, yes, that stuff's still happening, but is it happening because I'm doing more, or is it happening, because it hasn't gone anywhere? Well, I think it's also important to note that it's not like the myoclonic states, the twitching and the fasciculations and the soreness and all that kind of stuff. The pain is a lot less than what it was pre-carnivore diet. So I have to believe that like it's going in the right direction. Now, again, is that because the carnivore diet, or is that because I'm off all the medications? There's some doctors that believe that one of the medications that I was on is what was causing a lot of these things. So it, like, being on the carnivore diet fixed almost all of the symptoms other than the neurology. So I was able to come off all the meds. So, did the, what are those sayings? The cart before the horse, or the egg before the chicken?
Like, is there correlation or causation? Is it?
Yeah. Is it the diet, or is it the no beds? I don't know, but it's working. And I've had a pain in my abdomen for, I don't know how many years, like probably 15, 20 years. And not a single doctor has been able to A, figure out what it was, and B, help deal with the pain. And I've had injections with a needle that looks like a sword into my chest, steroid treatments, you name it, and nothing has worked. Within a day or two, it was gone and hasn't come back. I was having heart problems to the point where 2 doctors were ready to send me in an ambulance from their GP office to Emerge. And heart problems are gone. I had lung problems to the point where what do they call the lung specialist? Anyway,
like a pulmonologist or a pulmonary specialist.
He was kind of flabbergasted, saying like, you obviously have what he called a restricted airway, but he said you don't have COPD and you don't have asthma, but he said you definitely have a very restricted airway. I haven't felt those effects since I started this diet. Skin's gotten better, sleep has gotten better, mental health has gotten better.
Well, just having all that stuff off your,
exactly,
like, feeling good is
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, this is like we were talking about earlier, and you feel awkward, you feel it has an impact on your mental state. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Right. We want to feel good. Right. Yep. And so, it's important.
It's delicious if you like meat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's important to and everyone's going to be different, right?
Exactly.
And so you'd have to find a balance that works for you, just like people in society with their issues have to find their own their own solution sometimes. And it's not always going to be a pill. It's not always going to be a surgery, a procedure, you know, any intervention is going to have varied effects on people, right? The outcome will always be slightly different.
Yeah.
And well, that's interesting. That's good. So it's
yeah, it's working for me. And I said, I've tried a lot of different, I know people that have had like huge success on different diets, which is why I tried a bunch of different ones. But like for me, it's like you said, everybody's different. For me, I tried those ones and they were terrible. Not only did they, not help, some of them, anytime you put yourself into a caloric deficit of any kind, you're going to lose weight, right? But losing weight and losing weight healthily are two different things. If I put you in a cage and lock you up and give you 3 peanuts a week, you're going to lose weight. But is it healthy?
Well,
so
nutrition itself, it has to be nutritious, it has to be a safe,
and it has to be sustainable, I find. So like if you don't like meat and you really love the vegan world, and your body responds well to that diet, I think that's fantastic. That's great. And I think it's also sustainable for that person. If you hate fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff, grains, is it going to be sustainable for you? For a long
sure. If you're
time?
Learning and forcing yourself, learning and forcing yourself, it's well, this healthy. That's the age-old problem with lifestyle. Anything.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and sustainability is going to be probably a function of will.
Yeah.
On some level for a lot of people, opportunity and motivation, right? So if you have the opportunity for it, an opportunity broken down is going to be other things, right?
I think
that's going to be, do I have the money for it? Do I have the time to shop for it all the time? If you need fresh produce, because that's the only thing that, fresh organic, it doesn't keep very long. Do you have the ability, like Europeans do, stop every day on your way home to get it? Is that cost effective for you? Then the motivation. A lot of people, I learned this a long time ago, I'd have to find a reference for it, but a lot of people have, for lack of a better term, a death wish. They want to see, they think it's going to go a certain way. They have a way that they want to go. Tied into that, when people get sick, a lot of people don't genuinely want to get better. It's a sad psychological,
even if it's just
state.
Like subconsciously.
Because you gain something from having this issue, or they resign themselves into the place where, well, this is what I have now, and this is who I am. It's going to define me, and so it shall be. And it's easy to get into that state where you're like, well, this is what I am. This defines me. This act of mine defines me. This belief I have defines me. And this, to the larger point of what we were talking about earlier, when you have people with causes and whatnot, get off of that. Become special. For something other than, it's like this whole thing of body shaming and whatnot. People who, not to hijack this, I'm sorry, but
no.
When people are like, well, fat is beautiful. I'm like,
that is unhealthy.
There are pretty people, pretty women. There are handsome men who are larger. Those do exist. Those are often, I think, those people are that way, where they're perceived as being attractive as a function of their confidence and the air they bring with them, right? This aura,
personality,
that they have. All these other things. You're like, you're cool, I like you. But we can't overlook the truth so that you can feel better.
Mm-hmm. And it
Because
works the exact opposite too. If somebody's is so skinny that you can see bones, and you can see all their veins and stuff, right? Like, it's about being healthy.
Yeah.
Not
and what you are now, you can be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna settle, if you're gonna be like, well, I'm fat and I'm beautiful, and you're gonna like me for it, and I'm like, okay, I agree with some of those comments you've made.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which one, you decide.
Mm-hmm.
But could you be better? Could you be better off if you tried something different? And that's what I aspire for people. So when I don't agree with somebody who's like, well, I'm fat and I'm beautiful and you can't change me and all these other things, like, but you could be a better person. You could feel better. You could live that better life than what you have. I mean,
no matter how good you might have it now.
Yeah. Maybe you feel like a hard 9 all day. Like, I feel great. What if all of a sudden 10 is completely different?
Well, and maybe you are a hard 9.
Yeah. But what if that skill could be out of 100 instead of 10?
Yeah.
And now you could feel like a 90 out of 100.
Yeah.
Right. And you're 10 times better than you were. This is that rule of 40%. It's like when you start to feel like you're losing energy and like you're getting to a place where you got no more, you're only 40% of the way to your max.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, and that's what I would do at the gym. I'm like, I'm tired. I got 40%. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I gotta keep working harder. And then every time you get to that next level, like, oh, 40%. It's just 40% of where you were trying to get, right?
Yeah.
But it's to this want to just settle and just have it easy. It's easy to sit around and eat whatever you want and be called beautiful because you make people call you beautiful.
Well, and again, you lose the meaning of beautiful. Now we're just saying it because we know you want to hear it, as opposed to it being the truth. And it's well, all we're doing is enticing people to think that it's okay to abuse their bodies. We're enticing people to make them think that it's okay to be fat, lazy, and unhealthy. No, conversely, you can have somebody who is physically gorgeous and seems quite slim. It seems quite athletically fit.
It's intellectually revolting.
Yes, but even more so is physically unwell.
They absolutely
sick, right? I don't think that's beautiful either, right? But now you're trying to there's beauty in personality, and there's beauty in just aesthetics, and there's beauty in the mind, and there's beauty in how confident or how much of a go-getter. Like I think if we're judging somebody based on purely appearance, which is what you're doing when you see somebody on the cover of a catalog, I think it's quite evident that they're not as healthy as what they could be. So why are we calling that beautiful?
Yeah, and you're also only gonna reap what you sow. So if you define that as beautiful, you're only gonna have people to measure you by that anyway, who have no interest in the rest, right? So, if you're gonna say, I'm skinny and beautiful, I'm fat and I'm beautiful, whatever you're gonna say, then the people who are gonna agree with you the most are probably not the ones you want around.
Exactly.
It
doesn't mean it's not true. You can still be beautiful, just not that part of you. That part of you could use some work. But
and little honesty goes a long way.
Huh?
A little honesty goes a long way for a friendship, right? Like if I'm doing something stupid and but you don't tell me,
I don't think that's a friendly move.
You're not being honest.
Yes.
That's disingenuous, right?
Yes.
And so you might not necessarily like what somebody's opinion is. Hey, P.S. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Right. But if you start if you dismiss those people, this is why you've always had a much larger gift of patience than I have, minus my Tupac comment to that guy way back. Do you remember exactly what he said? Do you remember
No,
what
I
brought that
just
on?
remember, I remember being in
Referenced.
off-unit seclusion with an inmate, and there was a few of us in there, or at least you and I. And I remember, but I think there was a nurse in with us as well.
Yeah.
And I remember tempers were pretty high. And then I'll never, you always had some telltale signs on when you were reaching your limit. And I think because you and I got along so well, we knew each other so well, I could see them quite evidently. Although I think typically you hid them quite well.
Oh.
And I don't remember the specifics, but this guy was trying to articulate what he had done or what he was about to do or what he wanted to do. And he said something to the effect, keep in mind, this is like 20 years ago. He said something to the effect of, he gave you the finger or he told you to fuck off or something.
Yeah.
And then you questioned him on it or called him on it. And he was like, no, you misunderstood. I was saying that to myself. You know how like Tupac says it in the song, but
yeah.
And you were like, let me tell you something. I listened to a little Tupac myself.
Oh my God. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember this now. Yeah, we had some interesting times.
Oh yeah.
Interesting times. It's yeah, those were good times.
That was an amazing place to work.
In retrospect, yeah, and I've often commented about how like I hated what those roles did to me in many respects, but I love the people that I worked with, and for the most part, there's some people where I'm like, could have done without that, but that's it. That's just in life.
Yeah.
If I want it to be perfect, I'm never going to have it, which is another comment to people who are big about activism on things. Like you have to manage your expectations of life, right? You're not going to get everybody on your side, but it's the same thing in work. Not everyone you're going to get along with. We lucked out having a great team up there.
Yeah.
And there was some really fascinating people that we crossed paths with, right?
Yeah.
That if you looked at them as projects for you to work through and understand, if you look at the totality of their circumstances, you could go, man, there's this is a gold mine of life, right?
What do you find?
Some people, man, you're just like, you are just all negative and bad. Like, those are the majority, but like a lot of people who just fell on hard times, and it's one bad thing after another. Not necessarily bad people,
but a product of bad circumstance after bad circumstance after bad circumstance.
Yeah. They actually had there's a lot of stuff.
They take, it's not to say that they'll never get better. It's to say that they will take more energy, time, and expertise than you and I can give.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes even more than the system can give them.
Exactly. Yeah.
You were going to say something, sorry.
What do you find more stressful? Working as a peace officer, correctional officer, or working doing
peace officer for sure.
Air traffic controller. Yeah.
100% peace officer. Yeah.
Is that because you have an extreme interest in aero?
I think so. You have to be positive about yourself. You have to be positive about the people around you, and you have to be positive about what you do. It's very, very difficult to check those three boxes in the uniformed world.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Because nobody wants to talk to you when they're having a good day.
Yep.
The rare exception is probably childbirth. And even then, in that moment, they're not entirely sure they're having a good day yet.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be a good day in retrospect. But in the moment, they're scared, they're frustrated, they're tired, they're all these things, right? So even a good day is not nearing great, right? It's there's always a sad reality that you have to acknowledge when you talk about your good day. You have a good day. I remember this lady who was up on top of a parkade, and I ended up at the bottom of the parkade. And another guy ended up on the top of the parkade talking to her. And we had this interaction back and forth. That is a good day because she didn't jump off of the parkade.
Mm-hmm. I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
But we're still at a parkade. And there's still a part of your brain that goes, oh, what if she did jump?
Happen. Yep.
And then because you've seen that in other places, right? You may have seen, you may have seen it actually happen, or you may have come across it, or you've seen somebody like hit by a train, or you've seen somebody who stepped in front of a car, or you've seen the end result of a homicide, right? Somebody gets kicked out the door and just dumped right there. Like that's not an uncommon thing, as you know. Now you can fill in the gaps with other things, you know, right? So you can now make that person in your mind jump and play that out in that other reality. Yeah. Right. So there's no it's a good day that person didn't jump, but it sucked. I remember one of the big fights we had on train tracks. We had a huge fight on train tracks. And still to this day, I hate the feeling. Like on the bottom of my my stool here, there's a metal ring that goes around it, you know, like stabilize the legs.
When you put your foot on both of them?
If I feel the metal on my shin, like if I put my foot down and I feel it on my shin, it drives me fucking crazy. It makes me angry because I'm like, I just hate the feeling of metal on me. Don't like it.
Because it takes you back to the train tracks?
I do remember very vividly having this like crazy wild fight on the train tracks with somebody who was like, I'm jumping from a train. And we're like, get off the tracks. And they're like, no, fuck you. You can't do anything to me. And here come the lights through the snowstorm. And you're like, get off the fucking tracks, right? Like you're getting to a place where fuck tactical communication at this point, right? You've gone from ask, you're into tell, we're going to make, and now, you know, your fight's on, right? On the tracks. I remember my leg being on the tracks, and I looked up and I saw these lights, and I'm like, ew. And so, you know, I'm not angry, but that doesn't make me like crazy, but I hate that feeling. Yeah. Because you don't like, you actually don't like what it meant. Was that a good day? Yeah, I think it was a good day at work. We, saved a life. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Because there's another alternative to that, moment. Which is that, and there's another alternative, which is that the person was just playing us. And that happens when you have things like your borderline personality disorders. And you ask yourself, you say, would that person have done that? How far would they have gone? Would they have moved at the last second? So now you put me through this.
You'll never know the answer to it.
Right? So exactly. So you put me through this for what? For what? Okay, fine. There's another alternative, which is that, okay, maybe they did try to move, but then they trip. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because they're on train tracks, and you've been on tracks. They're not even, right? It's dark, it's snowy, it's shitty, it's wet, it's cold. They could slip and fall and get killed anyway. Right? So there's like all these eventualities, and you're like, you could play them all out in your mind if you chose to. So even your good day is not a good day, right? And so this is a reality of first responders, is that a good day is only ever capable of topping out at a certain percentage of what's possible of a perfect day.
It's so interesting that you're bringing this up, because one of my friends, I think it was the 4 Sciences course or something he went to. Anyway, it was some course that was offered to first responders, and he went to it, and I heard him telling somebody else this, and to date I have never forgotten it. And I use it a lot when I'm dealing with people that have, whatever it is, some type of mental health issue, or it's like even just coworkers that are
having a rough day.
One? Yes.
Little blips,
yeah,
big
you
blips.
and I talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like the lowercase t trauma and the uppercase T traumas. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. So anybody who's listening, basically, if you think of an ECG like a heart monitor, you have a bunch of little blurps and a big blurp, bunch of little blurps, big blurp. And typically when we think about PTSD, or we think of mental health, or we think of stress, we only look at the big blurps, where we're like, okay, well, you watched a guy shoot himself in the face, and you, I don't know, watched you saw a beheading, or or decapitation, I should say, or whatever the case might be. Big, heinous, horrific things.
Mm-hmm.
But what we forget about is exactly what you're saying. Our normal over a 25-year career is 25 years of those little blurps, that if we were in any other job, or I shouldn't say any other, if we're in many other jobs, we would never see any of those, even tiny blurps, let alone the big ones.
Yeah.
And what we forget all too often is, if you have 25 years or 10 years or 12 years or 5 years of those tiny blurps, you might never have a big one, but if you got 25 years of those small ones, they add up.
Yeah, they do
add up over time, and you
they
forget
can be bigger.
that. Yeah, and they forget that your normal isn't normal. It's normal for you because of your line of work, but it's not normal to see those things. It's not normal to have to deal with those things. It's not normal to have to make split-second decisions while you're dealing with those things. It's not normal to have to justify and articulate your split-second decision while you were dealing with that thing 3 years after the fact.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be discussed more, because a lot of people find the same thing, Nick, and I think it's a huge truth that not many people talk about. It's a very real reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That people just don't talk about, and they're like, oh, well, you picked the job, so you got to deal with it.
Well, and
if to a certain degree,
if you want to pick a group that I think everybody kind of rally behind, that is worthy of that kind of attention, go look at nurses.
Yeah, the medical
right?
field.
People in the medical, and actually, don't look at nurses, look at everybody, right? Because that ECG tech has to come into the room too.
Yeah.
When things are bad, they're in the trauma bays.
The
docs are there, and
the janitorial staff have to clean it all up.
Clean it up after. I mean,
the security staff have to hold them down.
Well, there's a whole ecosystem.
Yep.
That endures those traumas.
Yep.
And so, when everybody wants to blab about how the healthcare system is so overstressed by say the COVID times, right? Mm-hmm. You have to put yourself in an understanding of what baseline is, and baseline is not normal. Baseline is not zero on a negative and positive number line.
It's calibrated completely differently.
Yeah, it's a natural level higher, an order of magnitude higher than what you or I would experience on a
Yep.
day off sitting in our backyard, at least.
Yep.
At least, right? There's a sense of normalcy to it. But what normalcy does, I think, it flattens out the peaks,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get that spike. I think we both remember one pretty good rumble that took about 3 minutes compared
Just
to
be careful what you say, but
compared to somebody else's rumble that took
oh, I know exactly what
40.
you're talking about. Yep.
I don't think I said anything off color,
No,
did I?
no, you didn't. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, and that was a very violent encounter. It was a very, very violent encounter that the three of us were put in.
Mm-hmm.
And if we juxtapose that violent encounter compared to an earlier violent encounter, pick any one of them when we were all younger and new at it, that was less of a threat, but got more of a spike out of us, our adrenaline and our heart rates and everything else. The experience of all those other things flattened out the spike we should have had. Right? So that experience dulls that and brings the average down. Right? Whereas you get this, you know, quantify this big spike of adrenaline, you know, anybody else is way up here on their first day, but we're like, yeah, we've rumbled with this guy before. We know how bad this could be. We've also seen other things. So they've all kind of turned out okay. So we'll just see how this goes, where you have a little bit more lackadaisical attitude about it. But I guess the point is you're naturally numbed. It's an inoculation on the subsequent encounters with that, right? Every encounter is like its own little vaccination against the next one. Unless that next one is something worse. Right. And so your baseline, while, you know, if you zoom right in on it, might look like this. You zoom out, it's relatively flat. And so you take nurses and doctors and people in healthcare in general, even people who are in the back, you know, diagnosticians and people like that who are like writing up a report. Yep, this person's got cancer. That's dark. That's a dark place to live, right? So the natural state of alertness is higher. So it takes so much less stimuli to get them to a place where they can't think, they can't function anymore.
Well, and especially when there's no this goes back to you talking about unions, right? Like and working at a place where you don't need it, right? Like if there was more money in the system to put into good mental health programs and a good I don't know what you call it, like a decompression program, like you know, or fun days, or like some type of release valve, but there's not the money, and I think all too often whenever they do get money, they throw it at things that it's like the training for police and peace officers and correctional officers, and even what I'm learning now about nurses. You know, we teach people the bare minimum. I mean, you and I both took PPCT, which is a decent course, but it's very, 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 very basic. And the only reason why they give it is CYA, to cover their own ass.
Oh yeah.
To say, well, we gave you this. Right?
Just enough to send you out there with confidence that they've done their due diligence. Yeah.
And then as an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old, you know, underweight little dude, you're or a small female, your plan, like with no other training of your own, you're expected to go out and deal with the, you know, 6'4" Hell's Angel dude who has been training to fight his whole life and is, you know, in his prime at 35 years old. right? Like,
who is naturally intimidating.
yes. Yeah.
Right. Just to that, so back to that societal definition of terrorist, right? And this notion that violence includes words.
Mm-hmm.
So your level of combat anxiety coming up to that person
Mm-hmm.
because of what society has imposed on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Already cranks you up.
Yep.
Right? The panic you
Sure.
feel before you have to even have a conversation. You know, some of the neatest conversations I had were with like a full patch HA.
Yeah.
Right? They're at the hospital visiting somebody, whatever.
Yeah.
You walk by, hey, nice bike.
Yep.
Thanks, man. Moving on. Thanks, boss. You know,
Yep.
and they don't want their shit aired out
No.
that day. They like whatever. They're the masters of initiative, right? They're going to pick the time and place for their business, and they don't need any more heat than they got.
Yep.
At the same time, I have a job to treat everybody with just common courtesy and dignity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could get yourself to a baseline state of panic and fear very quickly because of what society has constructed as this framework for you to work within, where words are violence.
And didn't give you the proper tools to deal with it.
And didn't give you the proper tools and didn't frame it correctly, where, you know what, words are not violence. You're going to have somebody in your face calling you all kinds of things and saying all kinds of things about your family or your upbringing and all, and they're going to find a button. And when they find it, they're going to fuck with it as hard as they can because they know. So if you don't learn to lock that up.
Do you remember the inmate that was screaming at our coworker? I won't mention his name just in case he doesn't want to be mentioned. We were.
You're gonna have to narrow it down.
Oh yeah, like, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. We were dealing with an individual. I think it was the same individual
that did not refine the search criteria at all.
We were.
Do you remember that guy yelling and screaming? You have to try again. I still got a million hits.
I remember a few of them.
Yeah.
Search
the C drive.
Unit seclusion room, and we were trying to hold him down. I think the nurses or the doctor was going to give an injection, and he had threatened to have sexual intercourse with our coworker's wife that involved a old splintery broomstick.
Still getting a few searches back, a few search results back here. Lots of hits.
It goes to show what you're saying, right? Like I think, you know, they go until they find a button,
and they're gonna beat the shit out of that button.
And then once they find it, they mash it. They beat the dead horse.
Well, and it's an interesting point because so take that button, and think of what that button is connected to, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go and turn that button off, right, or make that button, it's been pushed so many times it doesn't work anymore, right? That's going to have consequences to your personal life.
Well, and
whatever that button is attached to, right?
And it goes to what you were saying about like before about you know, when you're new versus when you've seen a few things and gone to a few calls. So if somebody makes a comment like that and we're fairly new, we might go, okay, yeah, I had something similar like this in a training scenario. Okay, yeah, I'll just be professional. But once you realize that you've been around criminals who have the ability, right? Like I can list off, I'm picking on the Hells Angels. I've actually never had any issues with any Hells Angels. They've been fantastic as far as I'm concerned.
Most of the organized people are pretty decent, actually. But not decent people, but you know, they were.
So when I was decent with us in our encounters,
they don't.
Yeah, we're not advocating for gang violence here or anything. But
this is another point. Put a bracket here for a second. This is another thing where decent becomes very blurred.
Oh, but that's a whole other podcast. I love
right?
it.
Where all of a sudden you're having a
We could talk
conversation
about
with
that for
somebody
hours.
who's a complete shithead by society standard. You're like, well, kind of okay. Like, I mean, it's reasonable. He was nice to me. And you're like,
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How is this all of a sudden my societal standard? Well, he's nice to me.
Well, I watched him watch The Big Bang Theory. He was laughing. He was chilling.
Yeah. I mean, he's a pedophile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of these people are like, well, I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire.
Yeah.
But they were like, it becomes this very strange, like 100% of society
again
is not
what
what
you
you
said,
encounter.
your normal is not normal, right?
It is not normal.
And
you're like talking about a 10% of society that you might encounter routinely that's quite hostile to you.
Yeah.
And then within that, you can segment it out and be like, well, they're not the worst person I've ever dealt with.
Yeah. And I think so when I
close bracket.
first started, I was like 18 years old or whatever, and I was doing an on-the-job placement for the college program I was in, and I was a summer student with the RCMP, and we went to a call for a B&E, and
bacon and eggs,
and it was at a Hell's Angels house, let's say. And we show up, and the constable that I was with looks at me and goes, "Do you know where this place is?" I said, "No." And he's like, it's a known Hell's Angels house. And he said, "This could be an ambush. Like, just get prepared." And so we went in, and the two guys came out as we pulled into the driveway, and they came out to the car. And one fella said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the guy that called." And he reached over to shake my hand. And he goes, to keep in mind, the constable nor I had said a single word to this point.
Yeah.
He reaches over to shake my hand, and he goes, "Terry McDonald, you're the summer student, right?"
Mm-hmm.
He knew my full name and position.
Yeah.
And I had never even seen him before.
Yeah.
When we worked at the prison, we had an individual, see if I can remember now. He was an inmate who was unknown. I remember what affiliation he was with, but he was a very, very, very high up.
Yeah. And I think I remember somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their protective custody, I think.
So across the street at Remand,
across the street they were
PC. Yeah.
But they were,
and then he came over, and you could tell he was a big time player, like in his I don't want to name whatever affiliation he was with, but he didn't want to be at, was he PC across the street? Anyway, doesn't matter. So he came over to us.
I don't think he was if I'm remembering this story right, I think there was some issue with that because he didn't meet the criteria.
Yeah. So he came over to us, and he said, "Look, guys, like, no, nothing against you guys, but I don't want to be here, and I don't think I need to be here." And we said, "Well, there's not much we can do about it. Like the doctor's orders, like, you have to stay here."
Courts.
Yeah. And I said, "Look," I said, "if you really don't want to be here," I said, "the only person that can change that is a judge or the doctor." And I said, "The only one that you have access to right now is the doctor. So wait until the doctor comes in, explain your side of the story, tell him whatever you want to tell me, because he's the one that's got the authority to either keep you here or let you go back to remand."
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay." And he was very, very cool, very collected. And he's like, "No problem." He said, "Thanks very much." He said, "Do you mind, like, telling me when the doctor's coming in?"
Mm-hmm.
And he had already known the name of his doctor. And he said, I said, "Yeah." I said, "Doctor's going to be here at such and such a time. They're going to take you in. They're going to do your whatever it is, assessment or like induction or whatever. He'll introduce himself." He said, "Okay, great. Thanks." And I watched him because I was like, something's off here. And he went into the common area, went over to the phone. He was on the phone for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and hung up, went into the TV room, sat down, and watched TV. Doctor comes in. I haven't taken eyes off him at this point. Doctor comes in, calls him out to go into the side office to have a conversation.
Yep.
These are doctors that do this for a living. They work in forensics. They deal with all sorts of these type of people, criminals, and people that have mental illness to the point where they're, causing issues for society. And I'll never forget this doctor. Again, I won't mention his name, but it was very good. He's very good at his job. And they were probably in that room for minutes. Normally they would be in there for like an hour or two. And guy comes out, goes back into the TV room, the guy being the inmate. And
the story feels like I was there for it. I feel like I remember this.
We were on the same team for a long time. So this doctor walks out with a ghostly white face. His skin completely changed color, and he had like a totally separated face, like look on his face. And I was like, okay, something happened in there. Like something bad happened. And he basically kind of sauntered in to the nursing station, and he looked at the nursing staff and said, let's get the paperwork started to get this gentleman out of here. And knowing what I knew before the doctor showed up, I was like, well, this is fucking interesting. And I said, Doc, like what happened in there? Like, what, is everything okay? And he said, I've been doing this a very long time, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it. That scared the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And he proceeded to tell me that this guy walked in and sat down and said, look, what I'm about to tell you, you need to know is not a threat. I'm not threatening you. I'm not going to carry out anything. He said, I'm merely just doing this to prove that I am who I say I am. I don't have a mental health issue, and I really don't want to be here. I would like to go back to regular jail. This was a psychiatric prison that you and I worked at.
Yeah.
And he then proceeded to tell the doctor, this is your full name. This is where you went to school. Here's your wife's name. Here's your kids' names. Here's where your kids go to school. This is the vehicle you drive. And this is your address of where you live. So the doctor said, okay, you can go back to remand. But in a 5-minute phone call. So I guess what I was getting at is like, when you're in the heat of the moment and somebody makes a comment about, fucking your wife with a splintery broomstick or whatever the comment might be, it might push a button for you, because it, like, differently than it would if you've never experienced any of those situations before. Because you've experienced people who can actually carry out those threats. Yeah. Right? People who can find out what your wife's name is and where she lives with a 5-minute phone call.
Yeah. Some threats feel like a horoscope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like there's enough that you can pick off of somebody that you could be like, okay.
Yeah.
If you go to work wearing a wedding band, and a little bracelet that says daddy.
Yeah.
Someone's going to draw a conclusion that you are a husband and a dad.
Yeah.
Right. When they have specifics, and it's no longer a horoscope, right? Like you're no longer going to see a fortune teller, right? You could just dismiss.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I remember I got called. I had to go to court I was away I was doing something with the military, and I had to come back for court. So fine. So I'd go to court. By the time I show up, everything's been disposed of and whatnot, because everybody showed up, right? That classical thing. And one of the comments from the Crown prosecutor was that, oh, hey, you guys are on the list. Like, hey, what are you talking about? And it was this list of contacts. We were in a database, and it was just to be known that they knew who we are, and they being organized groups. They knew who we are. They kept information, and how they get it. They get it through all kinds of means, right?
They have better counter intel than we have intel.
Oh, absolutely they do. And they've got the time, right? And sometimes it's not about having the time, it's whether or not you've got the clock.
Well, and they don't have to abide by certain laws to get the intel, right? Like they can use different methods than we can to obtain the information.
Yeah. I mean, registries was a big one for a long time, going through registries and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, and then, at first I remember being kind of panicked about it. I remember like, oh my God, I'm on a list. Then I'm like, okay, well, this is stupid. I walk around in life. I put myself out there. I'm not gray man, right? I walk in the public with my name tag, right? And a big flash that says peace officer. It's got it across my back. Like, okay. And I interact with people all the time. And then it really
comes down to, do you treat people with respect and dignity, even though they've done a crime and they're doing the time. They're doing what society has deemed like a good punishment for the crime. So they're doing it,
and it's not my job to decide.
Exactly.
Judge, jury, executioner. Not my job.
Exactly. So
know your role is what it comes down to, right?
And even if, like, let's say, like, how many times have we physically intervened with an inmate or a criminal who afterwards it's almost like a sporting event, where they'll be like, oh, that was a good tussle, or, oh, I almost had you when this happened, or oh man, that was sweet. How did you do that? Or
that was a good squabble.
Yeah. And I think
when it was done, it was done.
Exactly. Or if it doesn't have to be done in the first place, because you have that rapport with the person, right? Like,
usually
because
the second
you're
time.
able to, you're able to like, how many times have you avoided physical confrontation simply because you were the officer that showed up?
Oh, it's happened. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And
absolutely.
I think that's important to note too. But
I think I actually caused a couple because I was the one who showed up. We've all had those too, right? Where you're like, it didn't really go as I planned. Sorry, guys.
Make everybody happy.
It just didn't like my cologne that day, and all of a sudden, it's very
like
very
Ron
easy
Burgundy.
to.
I don't like your face. Change your face.
Oh, I think we've all been there. Where all of a sudden somebody's fixated on us.
Yeah.
And they're like, this person right here is who I don't like.
Yep.
And you're like, but I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. And you're like, well, you didn't have to. You were just the one. They won't remember you tomorrow even.
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes they do, and that's kind of terrifying. But I think it comes back to, having do your best with what you have, and come at people with an intent to problem solve. And too often it's too easy to go down those roads of the 3 steps of, to ask, tell, and of course to make. And you're like, okay, well, I did my 3 steps. I asked them, I told them, and I'm making them. Okay, well,
my way or the highway.
Right? Like, okay, within those, there's subsections levels that we need to talk about, right? And we can level down a little bit. I mean, those are things you can't teach. So, but yeah, you know what? At the end, to your original point, I find my life now much less complicated than it was then. There's still residual things that hang out that I don't enjoy.
But as far as the actual job that you're doing now, like I would find that very stressful.
It has pressure, like, right? It has pressure.
I find the uniform work not stressful at all, versus like if you put me in your position now, I'd be committed, I think.
So I think there's something that needs to be addressed for anything, which is that if something you do stresses you out, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Good point.
If it's the other way and it causes you nothing, you probably also shouldn't be doing it.
Good point.
Right. So I feel pressure where I need to feel pressure. And then when things happen that are outside of the ordinary,
just enough to kind of turn your spidey senses on and like heighten your awareness.
I allow myself to have that so that I can take care of the people who are trusting me.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's like everyday life when you're, people say, oh, I'm anxious or I'm depressed or whatever. Like, are you actually are you anxious or are you depressed, or are you just going through an anxious moment or a depressive moment? Because sometimes those can be good. Sometimes those can help you grow. Yeah, they're very normal. And I think in your line of work, it's very similar in the sense that, like, if you become anxious or stressed, it's a requirement for your body to send the things that it needs to make sure that you're seeing what you need to see and able to do what you need to do. Yeah. And once it's over, it kind of calms down.
Well, I had a scenario a little while ago where it didn't pan out as I had envisioned. Like, oh, this is not at all how I saw this going in my mind. And there was a lot of other things. We got to remember the human factor component, right? That comes in, which we don't discuss in the uniform world nearly enough. We do in aviation, and we certainly do actually in medicine. They talk about human factors a lot. I had an interesting conversation going for surgery there, like rolling down the hall to the operating room, talking to the nurse, the OR nurse who's bringing me there, and she asked me a bunch of questions and what I did. And I said, interesting thing, I'm taking a physiology class, and my doc he's a flight surgeon, and or my prof is a flight surgeon, and we have all these conversations about how in medicine they talk about what you do in aviation, like checklists and standard operating procedures, flows, and all these other things. And then in aviation, often when you get into the nitty gritty, we talk about what they do in medicine, right? And so anyway, I guess the interesting thing is that there's a human factor component there where you're not robotic. You are the person that showed up to work that day with all kinds of different influences. And so I had one of these days where I was feeling not the best, right? Which just happens to everybody, right? You feel, in the words of mediocrities, you feel good enough, right? So you work, you're doing your thing, and then things start to not pan out the way you had hoped. You might try and push a square peg through a round hole kind of thing. Yeah. You're not doing anything like actively dangerous, because everything has buffers built into it at certain points, right? So, but you get to a place where things don't work, and the stress response can creep up, right? And for some people, it turns the brain off, and they can't think anymore, and that's a very scary place to be. And then you have to fall back on something else, right? And that's going to be a function of training and your preparedness, right? Yeah. So we have procedures that we fall back on. So you got to start picking out a procedure. But then you get all these other little things that creep up where, okay, do I sound confident? Do I sound competent? Do I sound bad at what I'm doing? Because I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you're talking to pilots in airliners, you're so used to being that calm, soothing, confident, I know exactly what I'm doing voice. Yeah. And now all of a sudden what my plan was is not working out. And now we've got to change it. Yeah. And so do I sound nervous? Do I sound edgy? Do I sound, oh, what are they going to think of me? Because I'm usually so good at my job, but now I'm going to hear these people again. And it's, people go through those very, very normal responses to abnormal events, right? And so you have to learn to soldier through those a little bit, but you also have to recognize when they're coming and have a plan. So either you can stop them, as we would do, uniform world, the tactical breathing, your square breathing, bring that heart rate down, right? Find that connection, right? Bring that heart rate down, bring your blood pressure down, chill yourself out a little bit, get more oxygen to the front of your brain, right? So you can start to think again. Be more of the rest and digest than we are the fight or flight. Get that parasympathetic nervous system going again. Or, the alternative is not good, right? And so you have to have tactics to do that. And so sometimes that tactic is I woke up that morning and I felt the same way I did 5 years ago when I went to work and it was a shitty day. So I'm not going to work today.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your tactic. But that's not a viable tactic always, right?
Well, and sometimes it's, I call it the red line. Like when you realize you're getting close to the red line, you want to nip it in the butt before you actually get to the red line.
For sure.
Red
Go
line
back to yellow.
Yeah, like you have to be self-aware and realize, what works for me. It's like a diet, right? Like what works for me to help regulate myself and bring me back down. Like what's going to recharge my batteries so that when I do go back to work, I'm my normal, good, healthy, good at my job, ready to roll.
And manage your expectations. You don't have to come back as Terry 2.0. Just come back as Terry 1.0.
Exactly.
Right? But be 1.0, not 0.5.
Exactly. Right? And definitely not -5. Right? Like it's and you have to, like, different things work for different people. Some people like to talk about it, some people don't. Some people like to do something physical, some people like to do relaxing things. You have to find what works for you. But
well, it's too easy to be, there's the other end where you have people who are just blissfully unaware, and it's like, well, those people look like they're having a really good time in life because they don't seem to care about anything. Like nothing seems to bother them, and you're like, man, how do you don't want to be that though. You don't want to be blissfully unaware about everything, right? It would be interesting to do a human factor study on law enforcement, like a real deep one. I'm sure ones have been done, but I don't think it gets the attention it quite deserves. Where you have somebody who comes up, like we have the Am I Safe checklist. It's attitude, medication, illness, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and eating. So am I safe? It used to be I'm safe, but now it includes attitude, and it was just illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and eating, or some people said emotion, but they put attitude in there as well. And so before you go to work, how does that look? And I can tell you, if you have a mishap, whether you're on the flying side or you're on even the controller side or even a maintenance side you're involved in, they're going to go through and they're going to pick through.
Sure.
And one of the things they're going to check on is how well did you sleep?
Yeah.
When's the last meal you had? When's the last break you had? How long have you been here? And all these other things. And I don't recall having that conversation after use of force, if ever.
No, we had really good instructors in the course that I went through, and they, like, for the peace officer, not the police, and not the corrections. But when I went through the peace officer program, we had a really good instructor. But that's, that goes back to education, what you and I were talking about. Like if you have a good instructor versus an okay instructor versus a shitty instructor. I happened, just out of circumstance, to get a really good one. I've also been a part of that program, and I've seen some really shitty ones go through. So, but that was the only place that I've heard it. And I've been in law enforcement for how many years, right? Like, outside of that classroom, I never heard about it again.
Yeah.
And it's scary because it should be addressed before each shift, and it should be addressed after every big scenario. It should be addressed after every mistake.
Yeah, I remember a really not a nasty one, but in an elevator at 3:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on my first night shift, we did 2 days, 2 nights of 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been
Which
up
is
for
the best
probably
schedule, by the way.
yeah,
I
it
love
wasn't
that schedule.
it wasn't terrible. I'll grant you that. If you didn't like days, it's cool. If you didn't like nights, it's cool. You just had to
Yeah.
soldier through two. It's those 2 long days in the middle where you had to stay up late after your
I love that.
second day. I know. Well, we used to go out. Remember when we used to go out and it was easy to stay up. And then we'd keep each other entertained the first night, right? But we'd be like, oh, I'm gonna die. But so something like 3:30 in the morning, I'd been up since probably like 11, right? So I've been up, say, at least 15 hours, right? We're getting to the end of the day, but I've also now flipped to the night. I'm kind of out of it. And this guy who had a history with us, all of a sudden he like kind of shifted in his wheelchair. They were moving him with a wheelchair. He shifted and kind of hopped himself up. He wasn't in a wheelchair. I just want to be clear. It was like there was a policy when you move somebody in the healthcare facility that had to be in a wheelchair or a bed.
But he didn't require.
They weren't allowed. He didn't require. He wasn't
handicapable
not like,
or disabled or
no. It was strictly a policy. They were not allowed to walk. Part of it was a flight risk for mental health. Yes, I don't want to be. Maybe I should just not even tell this story. Anyway, so he kind of shifts in his wheelchair, but he was already being kind of hostile and beaky with me, and I'm just tired. I'm like, I just want to go to bed, right? I just want to get this day over with, you know, and just go home. And he got up and he flicked me in the stomach, like he flicked me, like kind of like I don't know what he was doing. It was like he was trying to get my attention. Like he said something, and maybe I kind of gapped out. And in retrospect, I think I didn't hear him, or I was just kind of out of it. Like that, he was like, all of a sudden I'm down on the ground with him, and he's proned out on the ground, and I've got him in the arm bar. And like the process that happened to get from guy shifting in chair, flicking me in the chest, me taking his arm and hauling him out onto the ground because I perceived this threat, right, in my state that I was in. I would say that was a use of force that I am not proud of. Having said that, don't touch a peace officer, period, full stop.
Yeah, especially like your stomach's pretty close to your utility belt, and
you start playing stupid games, you're going to win silly prizes. And so there, and I don't know, like, I mean, there's been people who distract you and then all of a sudden they're pounding on you too, right? So I don't know where that would have gone. I'm just not proud of that moment.
Sure.
And I have a human factor conversation to have around that. We don't have that. We don't have that human factors conversation around car accidents. So you can go, and I'm not saying this happens, okay, but if you crash an airplane, the investigation goes through an extensive human factors discussion, and then you actually go. There's a classification system for it and everything. We can break things down. We can get quite granular through what's called a human factors analysis and classification system. And really what we're getting is to the causes. We're trying to get to root cause, right? You don't do that with a car accident.
Which you don't do
that. You don't get a forgiveness for it. So if you look at any one of these mishaps that's happened with an airplane in the last few years, big ones. There was one in your neck of the woods, right? With Air Canada, I think it was there in Halifax, right? That had a mishap landing in Halifax. I think there was another one in Halifax too. Was it Halifax, or I think it was a 747 that went off the runway.
I remember hearing something about it.
Anyways, you look at those and you go, well, an accident happened. You know, like if you think of it like you would a car, you're like, who's at fault? You know, make the insurance company pay. In aviation, we want to know why. We want to know why. We're not satisfied until we get down there. And then we put out a mitigation for it, or, we try to get things to what we call LARP, as low as reasonably possible. We can't account for absolutely everything.
But how do we make this as least likely to happen again as possible?
Exactly. And this is how we operate in an industry that is what we call USHRI, ultra safe, high risk industry. How does the system work to make sure that overwhelmingly everybody is safe? I mean, it's pretty insane to put yourself in a pressurized metal tube and then hurl yourself through the sky and then land where you want to be. It's kind of a silly thought. It's
crazy.
Right? It is. It's crazy. I understand it, so it's easy for me to explain it. But it is wild for a lot of people to think about that. So when something happens, we want to know why, and we figure that out. But we don't have that conversation with car accidents. We don't go and look and say, well, it was foggy.
Well, and car accidents,
there was this was the perception. This is how they saw. This is why their vision wasn't working well through the fog. They were driving in the evening, and so definition. A lot of our sense that we get with vision, something that I get a lot of detail of, I sense as being close. Something I don't have a lot of detail of, I sense as being far. Right. And then that, it's part of how I decide how far away something is. Right. And that plays into my visual acuity. Right. And how my visual acuity changes at that 20 marker, right? That 20 foot, 2020. Do I see something at 20 feet that looks like it's 20 feet away effectively? Right. 2010. Do I see something 20 feet away that looks like it's 10 feet away? Do I get even more detail? Right. Is it 2200? Right? Am I seeing something at 20 feet away that looks like it's 200 feet away? Right? Is my vision that bad? Those are things that we do. We have so many events that happen in day-to-day life with the police, with car accidents, with whatever. We don't stop and analyze. We don't get to a root cause. And the court system
doesn't do it with
no. And then we just tell somebody, hey, you were driving too fast. Hey, you were following too close. Hey, you were this. We don't tell them, hey, you know what? Your vision is actually not that good. And that's why you were following too close. Right? Because you didn't get the sensation of depth that most people would get. Hey, you're blind in one eye and you rely on binocular vision to be able to sense depth. Just cover one eye and try and pick something up. Right? It's not as intuitive as if you did it with your binocular vision of two, where you know exactly where something is. So, but these are all things that we don't do. Forget the psychology of it. If we don't have the ability to go into the physiology, we certainly don't go into the psychology of events. So perhaps we should, I know we've been chatting for a while, we should probably delve into a human factors conversation one day, and I'll be more prepared for it. But I think there's a lot of room there in law enforcement to apply that model.
100%.
I to be fair, maybe it is applied and I just don't know, but I don't think it is.
You and I have been around for a while. I've been security. I've been summer student. I've been a correctional officer, peace officer. I've been police officer. I've been military. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I mean, every once in a while you'll get like you'll get a really good sergeant or a really good, manager or master corporal or a warrant or whoever, who will sit you down and say, hey, you doing okay? Or hey, is there a reason why you went that way as opposed to this way? But it's even then it's made with really good intentions, but it's so preliminary that it's it doesn't really dive in like it should.
Well, and the other thing that's attached to it is the concept of just culture. So in just culture, so when we have mishaps in aviation, the idea is that you own up to it, right? Like, hey, I shit the bed. I screwed up. And you have to be an active participant in that process and say, I also want to know why I did that. right? You have to want to be able to fix it, but it has to be non-punitive.
Yes.
To report.
This is why
it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be subject to discipline, because it does happen. But you know, you look at really publicized aviation mishaps, and then you go, if you find a video or something on YouTube, just go into the comments or something like, you know, oh, that pilot should be fired for that and everything. You're like, whoa, you have no idea what somebody's enduring.
Yeah.
You don't know how many time zones they've covered. You don't know how many days they've been working. You don't know the type of operation they've been involved in. Have they been looking here for their whole flight? Because they've been flying in hardcore instrument meteorological conditions the whole way. And now it's a couple hours later and they're in a visual meteorological condition where now they can see, but their eyes have adapted to looking at their primary and multifunction displays or flight displays, scanning engines and everything else inside. And now you're asking them to look outside at greater distances. And so do we account for that? And so, no, just because somebody makes an error, the one in San Francisco was an interesting one where they, you know, almost landed on a taxiway as it's been put. And that was a bullet burn. That was a bad one. But you don't go firing people for that unless it's really, really warranted.
Well, you have to conduct an investigation.
Well, and then if you're going to go and start canning people, and so much for non-punitive and so much for reporting.
So right? what you're touching on there, I think, is what's wrong with the military and law enforcement communities. So you have these military and paramilitary training environments where they say, oh, no such thing as a stupid question. And then you ask a question and you find out very fucking quickly that every question is a stupid fucking question.
100%.
Even if it's not.
Yeah.
It automatically is, because you're a recruit, you're a candidate, and you fucking asked a question. So now we're going to penalize you for it.
Yeah.
And
socially even.
Yeah. So, and what's scary is, like, you literally see it. Like, if you look at the difference between Edmonton police and Calgary police, just those two alone, Edmonton has a paramilitary training environment.
Mm-hmm.
Calgary does not. Calgary has an adult learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
So Edmonton treats their entire academy as a stress inoculation drill.
Yep.
Calgary will have stress inoculation drill days, stress inoculation scenario days.
Right.
And then they'll do a debrief the following day or following the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an open platform where people can ask questions, talk about it, give their feelings, yada, 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 have a discussion. And how many times do you see Edmonton police in the negative limelight? And how many times do you see the Calgary police in negative limelight? When you're teaching these really important things to people, whether it's flying an airplane, taking somebody's freedom away, taking somebody's life, nurses, like, what medications to give. All of these things have to be done in a conducive learning environment. Otherwise, people are going to learn a dump. They're going to learn enough to get through the test because they're stressed, like, and they're freaking out, and then they're going to forget it over time. Whereas if you create that environment right from the get-go, now when that person does make a mistake down the road, which is likely to happen, they're a lot more likely to own up to it, because they know that they're either not going to get penalized or they're going to be penalized fairly for whatever transpired. And it's not going to cost them their job, unless it should, but typically that won't happen if you created this environment.
Well, you also create an ounce of prevention.
But that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what. Yeah.
It's you don't even get to a place where you have to have those conversations.
100%.
Because then people are like, "Oh, I've heard about this. I've read about this. I've felt this before.
I know I'm not allowed to do this. I know this is unsafe to do this. I know, because people know their job, right? And that's why, if you look statistically, at the two careers, law enforcement and aviation has a lot, we'll call them mistakes. Aviation has a lot less mistakes per capita than policing. And you look at the two training environments, they're completely different.
Yeah.
You look at the two recruiting environments.
Yes, I would never classify law enforcement as ultra safe, high risk as aviation is. Mm-hmm. Never. Because it's not ultra safe. Mm-hmm. It is high risk.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't get the same classification. I think, and aviation has had a lot of work to do. It still does. I mean, they still do. As they call it, marriage counseling, right? Where we do crew resource management, where you learn how to talk to people and how to engage, how to ask for things, how to be assertive, how to, so we still have those. But I think it's become more of a cultural norm.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think you always will to some degree.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're going to you have to teach those things, but I guess the soft skill is something that needs to be developed and harbored. But I guess it would just be fascinating to really get in depth.
I wholeheartedly agree.
You could do this with teachers. Mm-hmm. You could do it with anything. You just have to, you got to put the right people in the right positions to be able to do that. And so, one day I'd like to chat with you deeper about human factors. Sure. In my understanding of it, academically at least, and practically speaking. But I think, there's so many ways we could work smarter and not harder, and we could create an ounce of prevention. Right.
I think
one of the thing that we do in aviation is we communicate out our findings. So you have a mishap.
It's
mishap has happened. We then go and we have an investigation. Right. We look at that. Cool. We have our findings. Usually, probable findings. We rarely do come up with like a cause. You're like, this is the one. Right. Yeah. It's usually through what we call reasons model. There's a series of events that had to occur, right? And they're like pieces of Swiss cheese, right? So the holes line up, the bullet can get through, the accident can happen. We have the shell model as well, like how the live wire, you in how your interface is with software, hardware, the environment, and other liveware. Mm-hmm. Right? So how do you interact with software? How do you interact with the hardware? How are you interacting with your environment around you, or two-way street even, right? How is that interface with you, right? And then how are you with the people around you, and how are they with you? So we do all that, and then we come up with a bunch of findings. We rarely have I looked at an accident report, whether it was National Transportation Safety Board of the US or Transportation Safety Board out of Canada, even our internal ones at work. Rarely have I looked at one that was like, here's the reason this happened. This right here. Yeah. It's usually a series of them, and it could be dozens of points, right? Yeah. And then you leave the reader to come to their own conclusion, where if any one of those things is taken out, any one of those layers, you're now at a place where perhaps that mishap wouldn't have occurred and the system could have worked. We try not to be punitive, right? Sometimes it requires that people are corrected. Sure. That's we can't overlook that. But having a just culture and a non-punitive reporting process does not mean that you get away with things and you can just go crashing airplanes and doing stupid things. And it's absolutely not true. Yeah. It is meant to correct. And we do that by then sharing those findings, right? We put them out in circulars. We put them out in bulletins. From each other. Yep. I think if you took that same thing and now apply it to law enforcement, there is so much.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
And you couldn't communicate every use of force report, and you couldn't communicate everything, and everything is so dynamic and everybody's so different. Not everything is proceduralized. quite the same. You don't have a, in aviation, we'll have a like a QRC, a quick reference checklist, boldface items, things you commit to memory, very few, but rapid action items that you must do
And
in order to be able to reach over and grab the checklist.
A lot of people would say, oh, well, there's only so many airplane crashes, and there's I go through 15 fights a day as a cop or whatever. But then that's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix.
Yes. If we want you to have less fights, this,
you might not have 15 fights in your entire career.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to address. So
I mean, that might be you
got to start somewhere.
Take your uniform off and mingle with the crowd. Okay, maybe that's not going to work. But
so, before I let you go, because I've kept you long enough.
Yeah, we've been chatting for a while
with a wife and kids. I have 2 questions for you. We're going to try to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
If you won the lottery or made the money or whatever, and you had 500 million in the bank account, what would you do? What's the first few things you would do?
Well, I'd blow a lot of it on new hats.
Nice.
Okay. Get new hats. I don't know. I think I have an answer that most people might not understand. Okay. I don't think I would like having $500 million in the bank.
I asked this question to a lot of people.
So I'd never have to work for anything.
Well, you never have to work for anything, and I think you would lose a lot of friends that you enjoy, and I think you would gain a lot of people in your life that you might not otherwise gain.
I'd have a lot of cousins all of a sudden.
Yeah. Right? And it would change. I had this conversation with Stacy's uncle just recently, and we were talking about how whether you want it to or not, it would change your life. Because people, however that comes about, whether it actually changes you and you become a dickhead or you become a philanthropist.
It's a Richard Cranium, please. Thank you. Richard Cranium.
I like
it's a PG show.
I think a lot of people,
eat a bag
I'll
of
say
Richards.
Guys especially, they if I had 500 million in the bank account and you and I went out to dinner because we're friends.
Yeah, well, you're buying.
Well, see that, like, in my head, why wouldn't I? I have $500 million in the bank account. You have kids. That only makes sense.
But you might become the person who's like, hey, if I buy dinner, then I don't have 500 million in the bank anymore. I only have
well, there's that.
499,990,000.
Or do you become offended because you think that I'm trying to pull one over on you saying like, oh, you can't afford where we're going, so I'll take care of it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's that, like people are going to have thoughts and feelings toward how you spend your money, where you spend your money, your personality. You're also, your hobbies are, for a lot of people, likely to change because now you have access to bigger, better, more expensive hobbies. So
well, now my weekend of canoeing,
this is what I'm saying,
becomes a weekend of yachting,
and it's no longer a
right?
weekend,
and I have to take a helicopter to get to the yacht.
Yep. And you can go on a Tuesday morning if you want.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of your friends are still working and also can't afford their own yacht to go. You know what I mean? Like so it definitely, I can understand not wanting it because it definitely
I would I like to be able to say that I made that in my life? Sure. Yep. To have access to it in one time, I don't think would be good.
Okay.
To have the capacity to access funds because you worked assigns value to it and assigns value to what you can do with it. But to just have it, that's supply demand. So, and if all of a sudden my supply was so high and my demand remained constant, say, right? I've devalued the money fundamentally. If all of a sudden I demanded more of it, all of a sudden I've demanded more than I may have supply for.
I also
I can leverage, and
I also think it you know, people say money changes you. I don't think so. I think money I don't know if
reveals,
just like reveals who you are. I think if you're a shitty, narcissistic, selfish person, it's just going to make you more shitty, more narcissistic, and more selfish. I think if you're a caring, giving, you know, helpful person, I think it'll just make you more of those things. Last question, and then I will let you go.
It's exciting.
So you've seen my terrible YouTube channel, How to Build the Dream, correct? Hopefully I'm going to get better at making videos someday.
Nothing terrible there, man.
But I am having
you should see some of the channels I follow.
One of the things that I'm planning on doing in the very near future, I actually have one video that I'm currently working on my other screen here. Is I don't want to give too much away because it's part of a bigger project. And I'll leave that end of it at that. But one of the smaller parts of that project that I'm doing is going to be on this YouTube channel where I go out and do positive things. But it's almost, you know how we've had lots of positivity or lots of challenges over the last few years. Hey, do this for whatever cause, or hey, do this because it's cool or whatever. I would like to do a challenge to incite positivity. So like this year it would be like 22 for 22. So 22 positive things for 2022. Next year it'd be 23 for 23, 24 for 24. Now, the thing is you could do.
Thank goodness we don't live forever.
Well, and you could do 1,000 if you want, right? Like you could do, nobody's saying
only go up to the tens place value. Don't go to the hundreds place value. But if you do live forever, I'm just saying.
to incite like people doing positive things for other people. What would you like to see? Like
as items for that?
Whether it's me or if you were to do something positive for somebody, because I would like to do some bigger things that may or may not cost money or take a lot of time. But I also want to show that you don't need money. You don't need a lot of time to do something.
So I've really taken to coaching Little League.
Oh, nice.
Which is good. We're done for a little while here right now until maybe fall ball will happen, and then by then I'll be better. We can run around again. But I get a conflict
of interest because you have like a little Sammy Sosa on your.
He's got a contract already.
I've seen the videos.
Yeah, I'll have to send you another one, like the swings that are coming out and the throws and some of the pitching and everything. It's wild.
Nice.
It's wild. But it's so validating. I mean, I don't know where you're gonna go in life yourself, but like being a dad is such a cool experience for so many different reasons. And one of them is watching them have those little aha moments, even if you have to try and nudge it. I got one video of me and the little guy there. He would not run the bases or swing at the tee in his tee ball without me there to run the base with him.
Okay.
Right. So I ran the base with him because that's just what dads do. Right.
Yeah.
That's just what we do. And then you volunteer for these things to facilitate them. And even if you haven't played big league or any level ball yourself, we facilitate. And it's a series of dads who just get together, some moms too, but mostly dads. And that's what we do. We facilitate and we go and help and we just do the best with what we got. And so I see so much value in doing the best with what you got. Now, the other thing, I see a lot of value in sports for kids. And sports is not very attainable for a lot of people. Even for baseball, it's the cost is relatively low compared to other sports like hockey in particular, right? Which is largely sought after. But you still see these kids are like, well, it's just $300 or something like that for a season of ball is just too much for their family, especially right now with inflation doing its thing and everything else.
Well, and if you have 5 kids or 6 kids,
Yeah,
you know,
right. Exactly. There's no such thing as $300 for baseball because there's 2 kids. So that's 600.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's 2 gloves. Right. So that's going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of a one-time purchase for a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of baseball equipment you don't grow out the way you do hockey equipment. Like the cleats are probably the worst.
Yeah.
The worst
especially
thing,
when
right?
they're younger.
Yeah. Shirts only get so small, right? So the league kind of gets them the same size shirt and they're swimming in it for the first year and they start to fill it out, and then it becomes a loner and whatever else. But bats, right? Even a good bat, might run you $80 or something like that. And if you've got a dinger, like I got here the other day at ball, I was umping, which was rough. Be nice to officials, by the way. But I pulled his bat out from behind the backstop. I'm like, holy shit, it's dented. Like it's dented because they're into hardball now. There's no longer the soft T-balls. It's the hard, like it's a hard regulation ball, right? And so it's starting, dunk, you get a good dinger, and sometimes you'll also get a dent in the bat. So, you're going to have to replace a bat every once in a while. Now you got 2 bats. One, he blew the end right out of it. I wish I had it. I should bring it down here to the bar and put it up. The end is popped right out.
You should definitely put that
on his aluminum bat. Like he hit a ball so hard that the end popped out. So it like busted off. So, so you have these costs. I guess what it is I would like to see whenever I go to Canadian Tire and they have is it Jumpstart for kids?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm buying. I'm like, here's $10. Because I didn't have sports the way a lot of people around me did. So I know what it's like to be a little disadvantaged from that perspective with sports. I wasn't always the athletic type. I'm more athletic now, but it's taken a lot of work. I think I'm pretty good at baseball, but I didn't get that as growing up as a kid playing ball like my boys are. Right. So to see that opportunity come up, to see somebody say, not just to say, you know what, I'm going to take care of your $300 payment to this little league association that you're playing with. You get to play ball. No. I want to see somebody go out and do the legwork to get a hold of a place that has a ball diamond or a field and say, hey, can we use this? And just have it cost nothing. Go to a place that has t-shirts and be like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Can I get some really cheap shirts? Yeah. And it'll cost you nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can put your logo on it.
Yeah. Right. I want to see, like, these are the things, like when you talk about what do they call it? Everybody talks about environmental, cultural, and social governance. I think they talk about this is the total societal impact now, right? If you're going to be a place that's going to get squabbly about an $8 t-shirt, what if the kid that wore your $8 t-shirt came to work for you in the summer and did some labor for you and actually helped your outfit? Right? What if that was something you added into the pot? I want to see something that exposes kids to sports and gets people involved on a volunteer basis. I don't want the cost. I want people to volunteer things. I know everything has a cost, right? There's something, but I want people to see their time as the investment. I want people to come out and say, look, yeah, hey, I'm going to give you some t-shirts, but hey, there's a guy in the back who also played ball. Maybe he'd like to come.
It's so funny volunteer. That you're saying this because like specifically to what you're saying, baseball and softball were huge when I was growing up. I played it as a kid. And it was very big throughout our town. And we have a baseball diamond really close to my house. that hasn't been used in years. And the driveway down to the diamond is gated off. And I flew a drone over last year to check it out. And it's literally just the whole baseball diamond is just the dugouts, the canteen shed, everything is just sitting there collecting dust.
Yeah.
And
use it.
You know, it wouldn't take much for somebody to walk in with a lawnmower and a shovel, spruce it up, make it look good, crack open the gate, and get some volunteers. And it's so easy. Like I used to do that for when I was in the military police. We did I was the representative for the military police fund for blind children. And so every year we did a big event. And are you still there with me?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I think something just happened to the computer here. Sorry, one sec here. I don't know where you went. Where did you go?
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just can't see you.
That's the worst part.
Oh, there you are.
Hey.
I think the screen recording stopped, so I might not have video of this.
Oh, it still shows it recording.
Yeah, I just remember last time it only recorded you. So I was doing a screen recording as well to try to get... Anyway.
Oh, gotcha.
And I used to go around and like we asked, local businesses. So like we would get, coffee, because we would have a bunch of people coming in riding motorcycles across Canada, and they would stop in our town of Cold Lake for the weekend. And then we would have a big weekend event with lots of different stuff happening, but we would have to set all that stuff up. Well, it's charity, so we don't want to spend money, because any money that we bring in isn't profit. It goes into the charity, and they take 100% of the profit for the charity.
Right.
It goes straight to the kids. It doesn't, not a single penny goes to anybody else.
Yeah.
So I used to go around and talk to businesses, and most businesses are totally okay with helping out. Yeah. For us to find, prizes and giveaways and all that kind of stuff, very easy. For us to find free food, very easy. For us to find, you talked about t-shirts. We used to have to do posters to advertise whatever we were doing, whether it was music or an obstacle course or a four-wheeler rally or a motorcycle rally or whatever it was. You'd go to the local printing shop. Well, they would print it off, and they would only request that they put their logo on it. Yeah, right. Go ahead. Yeah. So it's free advertising for them, other than the cost of, the paper, right? They would give you so much. A lot
of stuff is nominal when you're talking about the volumes that
all it takes is that person that's willing to go out and organize and facilitate and put the team together.
How easy was it to find people's time, though?
To find people's time? Like to volunteer?
Yeah. Because I always find it so much easier.
It's hard for me to gauge because you're in the military, so you get voluntold, Yeah. So to find volunteers in the military is very easy. Besides the fact that most of us, are in there to help. And
how many of those businesses then are all of a sudden out there like, yeah, hey, we're going to have somebody come and hang out with you for this event?
Not very many, but a lot of them would like that. We had a big turnout, whether it was people from the business or people from the town or both, or and a lot of them would want something in return. So whether that's putting a logo on a poster or we would get free radio slots. So the radio would allow us to go in and do promotions on the radio. So some places would recommend, like they would give you something, but you would have to recommend, or you'd have to say that they did that for you on the
Right.
radio
Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is fair, but
Yeah.
I think if it's if you build it, they will come. You know what I mean? And so that's a good one.
Well,
That's a big
and
one. What's a small one?
This is where I would want someone to build it.
Yeah.
I want someone to build it, but I want someone to build something lasting. You know.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
What's his face? Oh man.
Oh, that hurts.
John. You okay?
Oh. Nothing worse than coughing right now. And then I get the piano key stomach.
Oh, the muscles twitching.
Doing right now. But no, like build a foundation.
And oh man, what's his name? The guy in Transformers. The main character.
Transformer?
No, come on. Oh, what's his name? Shia LaBeouf.
Oh yeah.
I think it was those two. Anyway, they I think it's in, oh man, I want to say New York, but I don't know for sure. They created a theater, basically the same thing, but for acting. So they found this old theater and they said, hey, we're going to create a program where, you know, people that can't afford to go to some fancy acting school, come down here. We're going to do plays. We're going to do, you know, all sorts of classes. We're going to do improv stuff, and you can hang out with us and like for free.
Yeah.
And
like philanthropy in a big way.
Yeah, and it's philanthropy that doesn't cost millions of dollars. Like,
well, I guess, you know what, interesting. So you say 22 for 22 or 23 for 23, whatever it is. You could take some big idea, like just setting up a baseball game for local kids. So you need 30 kids or whatever. You're going to come together, right? What do we need to do that? Okay, can I divvy that up into 23 different things and see each one of those things happen? And what that does is that sets up a foundation for future repetition and puts people into these positions, right? You can just come up with one goal of something you want to do. It doesn't have to be a baseball game. It could be whatever.
I did it in Cold Lake when I first moved to Cold Lake as a military police. People were complaining about how the kids on the base and in the town were very hesitant to talk to law enforcement. They didn't have a good relationship with the adolescent community. And I was like, okay, well, what are you doing to rectify that? Like, what's the plan here? Like, obviously you need to have a good relationship with them. So what's the plan? And everybody kind of looked at each other and went, what do you mean?
We don't have a plan.
Are you doing anything to try to?
A plan has not been issued to us.
So I had heard somebody did it before me years ago. And so I had heard of this thing and I was like, okay, well, what happened? Like, who dropped the ball? Like, when was the last? Oh, we haven't done that in years. So I went out and I found there's a school on the base that isn't being used for school. It's empty. And I got the approval to use the school, and I invited military police, peace officers, RCMP, I think some firefighters came. Anyway, and we brought
the firefighters came.
We brought them all in.
We put our weights down.
We talked to.
We're skipping a meal.
A few of the. Put the controller down, man. We'll play Call of Duty later.
Brings the TV with them.
We talked to a few different people. There was
bring a pile of calendars.
Social committee of anyway, they paid for pizzas, and they bought a bunch of Nerf guns, and we had a Nerf war in the school. So you have an entire school. And well, the first year we used the gymnasium, and we had a Nerf war and then a pizza party. And the kids loved it. Loved it. For like weeks before, they were making barricades and getting ready. And then I remember being in Walmart and there was kids buying Nerf guns talking about this big Nerf war that was coming up.
That's
because
awesome.
what happened was exactly what you said. I started it. Well, guess what happened the following year? It got bigger. Guess what happened the following year? It got bigger. Guess what happened after I left the military? It's continuing and continuously getting bigger. People are coming in from Bonnieville, all sorts of stuff. And I think it's exactly what you said. It just takes that one person to do it one time and then to show it's possible. It's like that with anything in life, right? Like when people talked about the first airplane, like, hey, I'm going to create the thing that's going to fly in the air and we're going to be in it, right? People are like, you are fucking crazy.
Yeah. Okay, crazy man.
Why would you spend so much time and effort and money?
Sometimes,
and then people do it, and then all of a sudden we have stealth jet planes and fucking spaceships, and like it's.
Well, you want to see something impressive? Just go on to ESPN 8 and watch the submarine battles.
Yeah. So what's something small you do for positivity? That was a big one. What's a small one? Something that doesn't cost any money, doesn't take a lot of time.
If I look in that same realm, I look at if I took that same idea of having a ball game, this is where you teach a kid to throw a ball.
Interesting.
Like that's my favorite thing. Before we call it here, probably like 4 hours. I know I told Trina, I'll be an hour. Come hang out with the kids in a bit. Me and my hernia. Anyway, you've watched Field of Dreams, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The line that gets me every time, doesn't matter how much I watch Field of Dreams.
If you build it, they will come.
No, it's right at the end where he's like, hey, Dad, you want to have a catch?
Oh.
And I'm like, right in the feels. Because that's exactly it. Because you just want to go and play catch.
Sure.
And sometimes I get hard on my boys, especially the big one. I'm like, hey, you got to make that throw. You got to make the catch. You got to make the throw. The deal in playing catch is you throw it right and I'm going to catch it. The deal is I'm going to throw it right and you're going to catch it. You got to make them, right? Just to push them to be better. But it is a truly, truly incredible experience to teach somebody to throw a ball.
Well, and they learn a lot more than just throwing a ball.
Yeah, and they don't know it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, throwing is an evolutionary thing. That's why kids throw things. I mean, I think it goes back to historically we used rocks as weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you get your food. Are you going to be a hunter-gatherer? You're going to have to throw. You're going to have to spear. You're going to have to do all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's evolutionary on some level to throw. But if you can teach how to do that very, very well, I mean, there's a reason that baseball is a sport that is taught early and not late.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can learn it early, it opens up all these other sports, eye-hand coordination, all these things, right? The mechanics of the game, it's high IQ. I mean, you look at a baseball game, if you sit there for 3 hours, I don't know, how many minutes of actual play is there? I don't know. Not a ton. Not 60 minutes like hockey or 60 like football. But it's very high IQ when you start to get into the granular nature of it. But just that throwing, it all starts with throwing a ball. The gateway that opens up after you learn to throw a ball.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many kids who don't have a dad
mm-hmm.
who can teach them to throw a ball. It's sad to say it. There's a lot of dudes out there who don't know how to throw a bloody baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So someone's got to do it. But you got to, teach someone to throw a ball. Doesn't have to be a kid.
Cool.
Teach a dad to throw a ball.
Yeah.
Let's go play catch. That is what baseball is a big game of catch.
Yeah.
And that's what I say to the kids when they were learning to pitch. I'm like, you're just playing catch with a pitch, or you're just playing catch, but you got to throw it into this box.
Yeah.
And make it so the guy in the back can catch it. Cool. I'm gonna throw it back to you. Now we're just playing catch. It just so happens that we want you to throw it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just growing on that. So just teach someone to play catch.
I like it. Did you watch the Blue Jays game against Boston?
Oh my
Where they
God, that
scored
was
like
ridiculous.
28 runs or
The
something?
fact that those Boston fans were still sitting there. I was at work that night and I kept on my breaks, kept coming back. I'm like, when is this going to end? And I'm like, why haven't these people, these Red Sox fans, why haven't they all dispersed and left? But I'm like, it's so bad
It's almost like they went out
that you
and all
can't
got drunk
leave.
the night before and just were really hungover. And
It was awful. It was like defensive play for the Red Sox. They just like to do, I don't know. I don't know what I'm
yeah,
doing. They completely forgot. There was the one that went like over center field. They just
yeah.
like turned around, looked at it. Mm.
And these people are being paid millions of dollars.
Yes. And if they can do that and get paid like that, then you're allowed to have a bad day too.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I appreciate you more than I'll ever be able to put into
Oh
words.
shucks, Terrence, I
And
appreciate you too, man.
I definitely appreciate you carving out the time to have a chat with me. So thank you.
No worries, man. I'm gonna go take some Tylenol and Advil now.
Listen, rest up that groin of yours, okay?
Oh, that's all I can do.
And no hanky
There's,
panky.
there's no activity.
All
There's
right.
zero activity. All right, brother. I'll talk to you
Okay.
later.
Tell
All right,
Trina
man.
and the kids I said I.
We'll go.
Okay.
All right.